Pro from Pretoria. Is everything all right? People talk or say things.
Hello?
Why didn't you tell me it was out of order? I suppose you think that's funny.
I'm not allowed out the front door.
Who says you weren't?
Them.
Who?
Them.
It was terrible out there. I could hear breathing.
We told you.
Are you worried about the man?
They hate us. That's the truth. They want to kill and torture every one of us. You can see it in their eyes.
Come now, Frederick. Do you dream about unholy things?
I really don't like what's going on here. There's something wrong, and that's a fact.
Wait. What did you dream last night? This manifestation of evil. You must be delivered from evil.
Brown-haired albino was unbuttoning his coat, his eyes on Cermak, who was shaking hands with Roosevelt.
Well, it's wonderful to see you, Tony. A lovely gesture.
I just wanted to remind you and your administration that you have my full and enthusiastic support.
The albino assassin was reaching under his coat, but I grabbed his arm and pulled it away, and his hand came back empty, the gun still under his arm as his coat flapped. I buried a fist in his belly and doubled him over. And when he came up, the snout of my 9mm stared him in the face.
You got you this time, fucker!
Sounded like firecrackers, and the muzzle flash above the crowd looked like fireworks, but this was something else. Blurred figures in the crowd were falling, and a stubby, bushy-haired brown little man in a white shirt standing up on a bench was swarmed like a come-to-Jesus meeting got out of hand. Meanwhile, the ex-blonde was pulling away, and I swung at him, and he went down, unconscious, as the mass of people around us were heading to my right. I moved against the tide towards Cermak, pushing, shoving, and got to that touring car where Miller and Lang were crouched over the fallen Cermak, red spreading from his left side under his unbuttoned suit coat.
Where? Where were the goddamn bodyguards?
I had the blonde, Your Honor. He didn't fire the round. Some bushy-haired little creep.
This was no time to tell him he'd been shot by his son-in-law's gardener.
What the hell? They got me after all, Heller.
The crowd was turning into a mob. Miller, Lang, and I were hovering over Cermak in the quiet of the storm.
Heller, get your people out of the way. We need to move the president and his vehicle out of here. For Christ's sakes, Cermak's been shot. Take him with you. Get him to a hospital.
Roosevelt, sitting in back, heard me.
Put Tony in here and get us the hell out.
The shooter's big revolver was clicking on an empty chamber now. But that must have had an 8-round rod, as I found myself on a battlefield where bleeding audience members wandered like wounded warriors, helped by their dazed loved ones. The brown-haired...
Although edited for television, tonight's thriller contains scenes of suspense and violence which may be unsuitable for young viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Robservations with Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, perhaps never to be defined, the existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, moi, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm Rob casting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. I'll Robserve from the Robservatory whenever I can, right? And this is Robservations episode number 1051. So, Comic-Con's over. It was a great Comic-Con. I got to see people, do panels. You know, there's something very nurturing about going to Comic-Con, finding like-minded imagination connoisseurs, because that's really what everybody is. They're all imagination connoisseurs, and Comic-Con is the epicenter. I mean, I guess the West Coast epicenter. I've never been to New York Comic-Con, but it certainly has been, for me, it was my 37th Comic-Con, and I feel that it's very nourishing to go there and, yeah, is it commercial? Sure. Is everybody promoting their products, trying to make money, trying to make deals, trying to, dazzle everyone with their efforts of imagination? Yes. And I find it everywhere I look. There's a smile put on my face. I mean, where else can you go in the world where a gigantic hotel has an alien Earth tapestry all down the side of it? I mean, it must have been 30 stories of alien Earth right there, and what's not to love? I mean, of course, you might want to see a more original franchise, but Noah Hawley doing Alien Earth looks pretty good to me. Predator Badlands, combining Weyland-Yutani with I'm in. You got the quiet king of franchises, Steve Asbell, over there at Fox doing some great work. Not only is he doing great work getting us new great additions to franchises, but he's also doing the Lord's work when it comes to physical media. We had Ridley Scott's superlative version of Kingdom of Heaven, the long director's cut, coming out to 4K for the first time. And, of course, Master and Commander is coming out next week. They're screening it as part of Beyond Fest in Hollywood on Friday, which is great. Master and Commander, one of the great Star Trek movies. It's not a Star Trek movie. And by the way, anybody who's working on modern Star Trek, I invite you to watch Master and Commander and learn how it's done. Anyway, so it was great. It was great to catch up with old friends. And speaking of Star Trek, I was on a panel. Ron Moore, I don't know how we got him to do this, but Ron Moore came on our Starship Smackdown panel. He was there for all 2 hours participating. And then afterwards, he came down and sat down with me and a few of my friends. Marianne Butler brought him over and basically hung out. 90 minutes, 2 hours, I don't know. I got to talk to him at length about For All Mankind. I didn't say anything about God of War. But we talked about For All Mankind, the state of television. I've first met Ron Moore way back in the early 90s, and of course I interviewed him, and he and Brannon extensively participated in the Star Trek The Next Generation Blu-rays that Roger Lay and I did, and then the Enterprise Blu-rays. There was a 3-year period of time where I literally spent my days making Star Trek documentaries about Next Generation and Enterprise. And if you get the Blu-rays of those shows, you can watch our efforts. I mean, I think between the documentaries and the audio commentaries and everything, there's 50 hours of material we created. 50 hours of programming on how a great Star Trek show was made. So I was literally, I guess you could say that's like being in college. Not that I haven't been studying Star Trek for my entire life, but I actually spent 3 years of my life talking to the people that made Star Trek The Next Generation how to make a Star Trek TV series. That was my job for 3 years. That's all I did. And you can see the results of that all 7 episodes of The Next Generation, and there were 5 individual, when they took the 2-parters and cut them together in movie versions, so they all ran as one episode. Like we called them the movie versions of the episodes, but so it's Best of Both Worlds, Redemption, Unification, Chain of Command, and All Good Things, which, to be fair, originally aired as a 90-minute piece. But yeah, I worked on all that stuff, and you can see it. So Star Trek has not just been something I'm interested in as a TV show, but more as a storytelling vehicle that has been important to me my entire life. I started watching Star Trek, the original series, when I was 5 years old in 1972. And then the next year, 73, 74, the animated Star Trek series came on, which ran 22 episodes, 2 seasons. And then, of course, Star Trek the Motion Picture in 79. And then you had Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan in 82, Star Trek III, The Search for Spock in 84, Star Trek The Voyage Home in 86, Star Trek The Next Generation in 87, Deep Space Nine in 93, Voyager in 95, Enterprise in 2001. So literally for my entire life, growing up, Star Trek was evolving and changing. And during all that time, hundreds of Star Trek novels, hundreds of Star Trek comics, model kits. I have technical manuals. The Star Trek universe was, for me, a very living and breathing, it was a very real fictional place. as I like to say on this show, the best fiction is the most truthful. And all of the people that love Star Trek, there was a group of people called backgrounders. Larry Nemechek was one of them, and they were creating fan blueprints, and they were making fanzines. One of my favorite things was the Best of Trek books that would come out with essays delving into the inconsistencies in Star Trek and the different alien races. And my whole life, Star Trek lived, and it grew, and it expanded. And most interestingly, it created a fictional universe over literally hundreds of years. And for the most part, up until Enterprise in 2001, you moved forward. And one of the most interesting things people forget now, because for whatever reason, the people since 2009, since J.J. Abrams, all of them have focused on Star Trek's rejected pilot. So for those of you who don't know, there were 2 pilots made for Star Trek. One, The Cage, a.k.a. The Menagerie, which starred Jeffrey Hunter as Captain Christopher Pike and Leonard Nimoy as his science officer. And, of course, you had Number One, played by Majel Barrett, who became Gene Roddenberry's wife, was second in command, a female second in command. The network rejected that pilot and told Roddenberry to get rid of the guys with the ears, but they thought there was potential there, and they made a second Star Trek pilot where they updated it, and William Shatner became Captain Kirk. But in one of the most brilliant things in the history of TV, they used that pilot, that first rejected pilot, and actually made a 2-part, actually the original Star Trek series, TOS, the original series, Star Trek as we like to call it. They used that episode in a 2-parter during the first season called The Menagerie, parts 1 and 2, where you find out that Spock, because they retained Leonard Nimoy, they retained the character of Spock, had a history on the Enterprise before Kirk took command. And that, using that episode, created Star Trek canon. It created a Star Trek history. And of course, famously, and so many people have made so much of this, Spock does smile in that episode, which the makers of Strange New Worlds have completely misunderstood and used that in weird, perverted ways to change the character of Spock. But you had Star Trek continuity, and then, of course, when they made the second pilot, James T. Kirk's friend, Gary Mitchell, when he turns into this godlike entity, makes a tombstone for Kirk, and it's James R. Kirk, and everyone's like, see, Star Trek isn't consistent. No, it was just a character made a mistake. Gary Mitchell made a mistake. That's what you got. In universe, Gary Mitchell, in his reverie after he'd been given the power of the gods, he just accidentally put James R. Kirk on the tombstone. It happens. See, here's the funny thing about fandom, and Star Trek fandom, I learned this. Star Trek fans were great at extrapolating things that we didn't necessarily see on screen. But you could infer meaning. That's what it means to be literate. Like when you're reading a book, they might not spell everything out, but if you're an astute reader, you can infer meaning from things. If A, B, C, and D are true, then E, F, G, H, I must be true as well. And the interesting thing about Star Trek was, Star Trek didn't bother explaining everything. It assumed that you as viewers could fill in things. It assumed intelligence on the part of its audience. As a matter of fact, most television shows of the 60s did, because Americans, especially at the time, had a pretty high level of general education. The people that had gone to school had a pretty, not necessarily collegiate level, but most people, like, for instance, knew geography. You knew the states, and you knew the state capitals, and you knew a bit of history as well. So you could do great things. And you could tell stories and presuppose the audience was smart enough to go on that journey with you, and you knew that they would fill in stuff too, which is something that I learned from a young age watching Star Trek. But what was so interesting was the universe that we only caught glimpses of was so compelling that fans, and the reason it lived on within us, is we were so enamored of this fictional universe that we wanted to participate in it and make sense of it. And Star Trek did really interesting things for a science fiction show of the time, where it created, like when another Constitution-class starship would show up, for instance, the Constellation in the Doomsday Machine. Famously, they used a over-the-counter starship model and model of the Enterprise, and they just reused the decals. And instead of 1701, it was 1017. The Constellation was NCC 1017. Now, did that, if you're rolling out starships on some assembly line, did it make sense that all the other starships were 17 something and the Constellation was 1017? No, that was just something that happened. But we figure out, like, in our minds, we want to know why was that. But what was really interesting, more importantly, was when you saw, it was brilliant, there was a fleet of Constitution-class starships like the Enterprise. So you could reuse your model and creatively photograph them so you couldn't see the registration numbers, and you could do episodes like The Ultimate Computer. You could do episodes like the Tholian Web, where you saw another starship. And what you were doing was you were creating this idea that, and in The Ultimate Computer, there's 4 different Federation starships. So there's all this stuff going on that was adding to the continuity and adding to the in-universe, the canonical universe, that there are multiple Constitution-class starships, and they're out there doing their thing. We don't know what their crews are doing, but we can extrapolate, we can infer that their crews are doing very similar things to what the Enterprise is doing. We also find out in an episode, a second season episode, called The Immunity Syndrome, that there is a Constitution-class starship that is manned entirely by Vulcans. Now, that's a really interesting thing to say, like, okay, well, obviously Spock was, maybe he wasn't the first Vulcan in Starfleet, but he was one of the only ones, certainly one of the first adopters. Weren't many Vulcans, but there was a Starfleet vessel that was manned entirely by Vulcans, probably by the Vulcan Science Academy. They didn't go through the Academy. They didn't go through Starfleet Academy, but they had their own Constitution-class ship, the Intrepid, that was destroyed near the Gamma 7A star system. And one of my favorite Star Trek episodes, one of the great unsung episodes of Star Trek, The Immunity Syndrome, which reused music from the Doomsday Machine. That was a certain flavor of Star Trek episode. One of my favorite flavors of Star Trek episode was the Immunity Syndrome and the Doomsday Machine. They were very serious, contemplative, action-packed, scary episodes of Star Trek, which apparently the makers of modern Star Trek have never seen, because they don't know how to do that kind of a Star Trek episode, which is not surprising that they haven't seen it. But one of the great things about Star Trek for me was Star Trek was essentially an anthology series with a recurring cast. And you had many different flavors of Star Trek episodes. When they would delve into romance, one of the great Spock episodes of all time is This Side of Paradise, from the first season, where you meet a woman that was in love with Spock back on Earth. But Spock could never return her love, but being infected by these spores, he lets his emotional guard down, and he actually can have a romance with her and consummate their relationship. And it's done in a very adult manner. And at the end of the episode, when he's back to normal, it leaves you with an emotional wallop, because it was written by adults that had adult situations and that understood what all those things meant. And cut to modern Star Trek, the infantile junior high romantic shenanigans have taken front row center with the hack writers that write Star Trek Strange New Worlds, one of the greatest wastes of a franchise, in American entertainment history, that people have been bamboozled into thinking it's good. But we'll get to that in a minute. But for me personally, the Star Trek franchise has made me more interested in the world and the universe around me. One of the things about early Star Trek episodes is a lot of the time they would do war allegories. Of course, the episode Balance of Terror that Strange New Worlds desecrated. Balance of Terror in the first season, the first time we see the Romulans. My God, if you want to do... It's monumentally depressing. But there is an episode of Strange New Worlds, and there is the Star Trek episode Balance of Terror from the original series. I don't even remember. I don't remember the names of Star Trek Strange New Worlds episodes, but they even ape camera angles from Balance of Terror. But it's another future imperfect episode. But if you watch those, there's probably no greater example of how modern Star Trek is really, it fails on almost every level, with the exception of beautiful production design. The cast is uniformly excellent for the most part, great actors, but there's an incredible failure of writing. The writing in modern Star Trek is god-awful and abysmal. Why? Because those people didn't grow up reading. They didn't grow up reading, and they only ever really watched television. And science fiction is a literary-based genre. And to be fair, there weren't a lot of great science fiction television shows. There were a few. I would say the original Star Trek, Twilight Zone, The Prisoner. You know, I liked a lot of the X-Files, but that was back in the 90s. But the people that write modern Star Trek now are disciples of Joss Whedon. I mean, Buffy did a musical episode. So Star Trek Strange New Worlds did a musical episode. As we found out at Comic-Con in the 4th season of Strange New Worlds, they're going to ape an episode of Angel, where Angel became a puppet. And the Henson Company is, I mean, it's interesting. Like, if they have to, there's nothing, Strange New Worlds is, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. The startling unoriginality of that show is shocking to me. Again, this weird idea, 2009, let's go back and revisit Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. Star Trek Discovery, let's go back and let's do a prequel to the original series where we'll introduce Captain Pike, that we already reintroduced in Star Trek 09, who was in the first failed pilot for Star Trek, but we met him in Menagerie Part 1 and 2. Oh, and let's introduce Pike and Spock and the Enterprise, and let's go make another prequel show. So we have 3 prequel movies to the original series. We have Star Trek Discovery, which is a prequel to the original series. Now we have Strange New Worlds, which is a prequel to the original series. And Strange New Worlds is so wildly unoriginal that they don't even take a character, an older white guy, Dr. Boyce, who in the original The Cage, the greatest scene in that episode is between Dr. Boyce, the doctor, and who also is a bartender, and comes to talk to Chris Pike. The one character that's original to that show, they jettisoned. I wonder why. And then what did they do? For Strange New Worlds, we get Dr. Mbenga, we get Nurse Chapel, we get Uhura, we have Spock. I mean, all they do is steal from the original series, which, as somebody who spent 3 years documenting Star Trek The Next Generation, so imagine, if you will, for Star Trek The Next Generation, they're going to make it, how do you recreate a legend? The actors will tell you. Even Patrick Stewart thought, his agents told him, you'll do 13 episodes, it'll get canceled. They can never recreate a legend. But Dorothy Fontana and David Gerrold from the original show came back to help Gene craft Star Trek The Next Generation. There was a mandate on the show. They were going to create their own, or it was going to be original. They were going to very seldom reference the original series. It took place almost 100 years later. It was very important that they create their own identity. The problem was the kinds of stories that they were going to tell and the way they told them, they didn't change that up enough. They wanted to recreate the format, but they wanted to not reference the original series. You had DeForest Kelley appearing as Admiral McCoy. They don't even mention his name, but you know it's him, obviously, because it is him. You had John D.F. Black, who wrote the original Naked Time from the original series first season, wrote The Naked Now, which is not a great episode of Star Trek in Next Gen. But it wasn't until the 3rd season of Star Trek The Next Generation that they made a direct tie to the original series in an entire episode. And it is a wonderful episode called Sarek. And the story was by Peter S. Beagle, a wonderful fantasy writer. He wrote The Last Unicorn. He wrote a novel that I recommend everybody read, a beautiful novel that I would love to make into a movie. A friend of mine named Mary Forrest, a woman who is near and dear to my heart, Mary Forrest, turned me on to this Peter S. Beagle story called A Fine and Private Place. You can get a hardcover of A Fine and Private Place, and it has The Last Unicorn in it. But Peter S. Beagle came up with the story of Sarek. And to me, if you're going to bring back legacy characters, Sarek, on any show, not just Star Trek, is a wonderful template for how to do that. Star Trek is an action-adventure allegorical show. And the great thing about Star Trek is the best fiction, again, is the most truthful. And what Sarek did was, imagine if you're a Vulcan. Now, here's another thing people don't understand. Vulcans have emotions. They don't have some physiological predisposition to not have emotions. They have emotions. They used to be a very passionate people, and it almost destroyed them. And a religious leader, or I call him religious, not really religious, but a leader with a new way of approaching life, Surak, that we first met in the 3rd season episode, The Savage Curtain. Surak came up with the idea of applying logic to Vulcan philosophy. They've mentioned other Vulcan philosophers like T. Plana Hoth, but we didn't meet them. But we met Surak, and Surak was a hero to Spock. And the idea that the Vulcan civilization, so they wouldn't destroy themselves, applied the idea of logic and true mental discipline, something like Bushido or those kind of, you could go back, take your pick. You could go to the Bhagavad Gita, you could go to, Hindu, whatever. It was an analogous to something like that, where the entire Vulcan civilization, to preserve themselves, governed their passions by learning how to control their emotions. They have them, but they control them. Also, Vulcans understand humor. Spock especially. His mother was human. The idea that Spock does not understand the ways of humans from Earth is ridiculous. If you don't get the great thing, Leonard Nimoy's performance in Star Trek was so wonderful because he understood humor, but he wasn't going to let you know it. The thing about Spock was he had to be the best Vulcan, and in a way had to be the best human as well. In Strange New Worlds, they act like he's got a learning disability. They've actually said he has a learning disability, and they treat him like he's Data. They're not sophisticated enough to write Spock the way he needs to be written, which is surprising because you could go back and if you ever watch the entirety of the original series, you could see exactly how Spock should be written. And Ethan Peck is a great actor. He has been given shit lines of dialogue. He's jobbed every episode. Spock is the ultimate badass, and they have turned him into the ultimate chump. This lovelorn puppy dog that everybody punches. I mean, Leonard Nimoy Spock wouldn't put up with Nurse Chapel for 5 minutes, and it's maddening to watch a very unsophisticated vision of romance. I mean, puerile and junior high level at best. You wonder if any of the people that currently write Strange New Worlds have ever had a great romance in their lives, much less had great sex. Maybe a rim job or two, I don't know. Might help them out. Maybe it'll help their writing, because they certainly can't write romance for shit, nor should Star Trek be a romantic show. Just saying. I mean, my God. A little too much Buffy, a little too much Angel, a little too much, if you read all the showrunners who worked on the show, none of them have a really great science fiction pedigree. Maybe I should make everybody a reading list of 25 books you should read before you even come near Star Trek. Futile, I know. But between the identity politics of Discovery, where everyone is self-inserting themselves into a show, which is just, it's not even about identity politics. It's about the fact that you really aren't sophisticated enough, nor do you have enough to say about even your own identity, that you should be inserting it into a science fiction show. You know, you're not Ralph fucking Ellison. You're not writing The Invisible Man. I wish you were, because then Star Trek would be good. You know, maybe. But no, we have put up with, my God, the swill of terrible, terrible writing. Let me give you an example. So, let's go back to this ethos of the original Star Trek The Next Generation. They wanted to create their own characters. They wanted to not draw parallels or delve into the original series because they wanted Star Trek The Next Generation to have its own identity. So, Ira Steven Behr, who was one of the great architects of Deep Space Nine, came to work on Star Trek The Next Generation in the 3rd season, when basically, as he'll tell you in our documentaries, that the season had already turned to shit, even though it turned out to be one of Next Generation's best seasons. So, when he was working on Sarek, Picard mind melds with Sarek, trying to help him, and Ira Steven Behr said, look, I mean, obviously the relationship Spock had with Sarek looms large in the Star Trek mythos, and not only did we see it in the 2nd season episode Journey to Babel, but we continued on. We met Sarek again, Mark Leonard, the same actor, in Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, in Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, in Star Trek 6. Your friends are people of good character. And Spock and his rift was repaired, and in the episode Sarek, when Picard has his mind within his own mind, Ira Steven Behr had to beg Rick Berman, the showrunner of TNG, to have him even think Spock. They got one utterance. They could say Spock one time. That's how close Rick Berman guarded Next Generation to keep it, call it pure, if you want. They wanted their own show to have their own identity. That's how great, by the way, a great choice. When they brought back Montgomery Scott for the 6th season episode Relics, or they brought back Leonard Nimoy himself for the 2-parter Unification, parts 1 and 2, where you went into the Vulcan, Spock as an ambassador wanted to bring about the reunification of the Romulans and the Vulcans. Great story, by the way, great premise for a story. Episode execution, maybe not as good as you wanted it to be, but really great stuff. That was done for Star Trek's 25th anniversary in 1991. That's why they did Unification. Relics was a 6th season episode, but then they did in Deep Space Nine, Trials and Tribulations, which was a 30th anniversary Star Trek episode, which is one of the great episodes where they went back in time and they actually inserted our stalwart crew of Deep Space Nine, Terok Nor, into the actual footage. By the way, making an episode for canon, The Trouble with Tribbles was, of course, from the 67-68 season of Star Trek, the 2nd season. And in 1996, almost 30 years had passed, they were inserting the Deep Space Nine cast into that footage, meaning that you had continuity. Nobody said, well, you know what, we really should go back and redesign, make it more visually exciting. Because, no. They respected the canon. And see, if you're a fan of Star Trek, one of the joys of Star Trek is they did shit like that. The fact that of course, Greg Jean built a new model of the Enterprise, the Connie, built a new model of the D7 battlecruiser, and built a new model of K7 space station. So they could create new space shots, which they couldn't do during the original series. But you had all that continuity over almost 30 years of visual continuity. That was the fun thing about Star Trek, is you could see the evolution of everything. That was part of the fun of being a Star Trek fan. For whatever reason, in the modern age, you could light the original Star Trek sets. You could recreate the sets. I know, because I've been on set recreations of the original sets, or close enough. You can light those sets. They can be the exact same sets. You could tweak the details, and make it look pretty much similar and just light it differently. But there is absolutely, that ethos is not, it's really interesting. They want to change everything else in modern Star Trek, and yet they don't want to create their own characters. And if they do want to create their own characters, like La'an Noonien Singh, she has to be a descendant of Khan, which is odd because during the show, they totally created a new continuity for Khan and the eugenics wars, which would mean La'an doesn't exist? I don't know. I don't think they know either. Does it really matter? But anyway, so there was an effort to create new characters, new stories that were not tied to the original series. That was true of Deep Space Nine. It was true of Voyager. They would avail themselves occasionally of an episode here or there. I mean, hell, Next Generation pioneered doing their own continuity in the third season in Yesterday's Enterprise, when where you had Denise Crosby, who left the show, famously left the show as Tasha Yar in the first season, to come back. She died in the first season. She was killed by Armis. She comes back in the third season as a character who didn't die in an alternate reality, in a banger of a show, and in a creative... Not only do they do that, but she actually goes back in time, and her own daughter is later seen as Sela further down the road. I mean, crazy shit. I know, it sounds crazy. It was great, though. But it was unique to their show. The second episode of Strange New Worlds, Season 3, Wedding Bell Blues. Wedding Bell Blues brings back Roger Corby from the first season episode, What Are Little Girls Made Of? Brings back the character of Trelane from the first season original series, The Squire of Gothos. Basically brings back John Delancey as Q. And I don't know if they thought this was clever or not. Apparently, Trelane is now Q's son, as if no one, it's amazing, no one had ever thought to ever tie the characters of Trelane and Q together. Oh, except Peter David and many other, the Tipton brothers and God knows how many other people have already delved into those things in a much more interesting and thoughtful manner. Read the Star Trek novel Q Squared. They released it. It was such a good novel. It was such a prestigious novel by the late, great Peter David that they released it in hardcover. I mean, it's like you're waiting. I don't know if those people think that they've done something original, but in one episode of Strange New Worlds, do they give us... Oh, and not only that, but the whole thing revolves around this romantic... They've made Spock and Christine Chapel romantically linked when everyone knows in the original series it was unrequited love from Christine's point of view. But oh no, because all they can do is look at Joss Whedon. We gotta do that show. We gotta do that romantic thing. I mean, because why come up with a really compelling, interesting science fiction story when you can just tell interpersonal romances that are wildly inappropriate? Spock would never engage in them to what? Appeal to the junior high level nature of the writing on Star Trek Strange New Worlds? But they had to reference 2 episodes of the original series and Q in one episode of their show. This is of course coming off of a second of the Gorn 2-parter hegemony, where they've bogarted the Gorn from... By the way, the Gorn actually appeared twice in early Star Trek, once in the episode Arena and once in the animated episode Time Trap. But they decided, oh no, we need a big bad for Strange New Worlds. Let's look at the Gorn as the big bad, rather than create a new alien species out of whole cloth. We can't do that. We're not creative enough to do that, nor do we want to spend the time doing that. Let's steal something that we didn't write, we didn't create, that was depicted very differently, but we'll update it. And not only are we going to use the Gorn, we're just going to steal the xenomorph idea from aliens. We'll just turn them into xenomorphs. I mean, if you're a creator of a show, wouldn't your first impulse to be, what can we do to make this show ours? Why don't we create our characters out of whole cloth? And you could say Lon Noonien Singh is, but it's not. You're stealing from Space Seed. You're stealing from, that's a first season episode where Khan is originally introduced, and Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. So all you're doing, and then let's introduce Kirk. Let's introduce Scotty, who's inexplicably younger than Kirk in this universe. All they do is show how creatively bankrupt they are, fraudulent creators. Now, I don't mean the actors are doing the best they can. They're not writing the show, but it is the most creatively bankrupt of all Star Trek shows. I mean, I understand Lower Decks was farcical. So, Lower Decks was a show for people. It's like everybody on Lower Decks watched Star Trek. I get it. Mike McMahon did his season 8 of The Next Generation, but as I always said about him, he approaches it from outside the franchise. So that's fine, whatever. But Strange New Worlds is one of the most creatively bankrupt shows because it can't exist without previous iterations of Star Trek. And all it does, or they'll rip off, without accreditation, they'll rip off Ursula K. Le Guin's great short story, Those Who Walk Away from Umlaus. Alex Kurtzman will even go, oh, we took inspiration from that story. Inspiration? You fucking stole it. You stole it. You just stole that show. And you're talking about how you took inspiration from it. I'll tell you something. The original series, Arena, it's very ironic. Because when the Gorn is introduced in the original episode Arena from the first season of Star Trek, they got a little dinged about it because that episode bared a strong resemblance to a Frederick Brown short story. And so they went back and they gave... It wasn't like it was intentional. I believe it was Gene Kuhn, and he had read the story and he incorporated it into Star Trek. I mean, they were taking inspiration from a lot of different places. But when it was pointed out, what did they do? They credited writer Frederick Brown. They credited him as the inspiration. So the Gorn episode was an episode that was inspired by a Frederick Brown short story, and the writers on Star Trek, the show-running staff, Roddenberry and everybody, credited Frederick Brown for it, for the Gorn. And so what does Strange New Worlds do? Totally just bogart the Gorn, take Gorn, and we're going to rewrite the whole Gorn mythology, and we're going to make it not original. They don't look at let's look at the life cycle of reptiles. What would a spacefaring reptilian race, how would they have evolved? That's too difficult. Let's just make them like xenomorphs and alien. That's easy. People don't understand that. Yeah, but how do you go from the depiction of the young to how do they become a spacefaring race that has, as we saw in Arena, better warp technology than the Federation? Who cares? Doesn't matter. So then Episode 3, we got Space Zombies. Episode 3, Season 3 of Strange New Worlds. The upcoming episode, they're going to go back to the 60s and do some, I don't know, Kirk gets to play some detective that he does some Shatnerisms playing the 60s detective. Let me tell you something. Star Trek, I know a lot of people look back at it now and they see the campy elements of it. But I want to point out, humorous. There are 2 episodes of Star Trek. Really, there's more than 2, but there's 2 major episodes that are overtly comedic. They're both in the 2nd season. Trouble with Tribbles and A Piece of the Action. Trouble with Tribbles, everybody knows. While the Trouble with Tribbles is humorous, it's situationally humorous. I mean, the characters are looser, and Kirk meets Captain Koloth, and they have and Kirk doesn't like the bureaucracy on board K7 or Federation bureaucracy. But at its core, the Tribbles are amusing, but the Tribbles represent an ecological threat. And indeed, when they've eaten all the Quattro Triticale, the rampant life cycle of the Tribbles are dangerous. So the situation is humor. It's full of humor, but it doesn't compromise the characters. The characters aren't made to look stupid. Cut to one of the most egregiously awful moments in all of modern Trek history is a Trek short take where they bring the Tribbles into it, and it is where apparently it's just if you don't like somebody, especially an older white dude, it's okay that they get killed. That Tribbles episode, it's only a short take, is, I think that might be Star Trek's worst moment ever. And Star Trek's had some bad moments. But that episode was so egregiously awful. Gene Roddenberry, if he saw that, I think he would have wept that somebody made that Short Treks episode with the Tribbles. And of course, in that Tribbles episode, because everybody has to, the guy genetically, it's we humans from Earth have genetically engineered the Tribbles to be the way they are. That's all us. Kind of like in Star Trek Strange New Worlds, if I might rant, there's an episode where Spock is turned human. See, here's another thing about the people that make Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and we're going to get an upcoming episode where our human characters are turned into Vulcans. But let's talk about a little science fiction here. Just because you are physiologically turned into Vulcans doesn't change what's in your mind. So you're not going to suddenly start talking or thinking like a Vulcan. And it's this kind of, again, you extrapolate. If A, B, and C are true, D, E, F, G, H, I must be true as well. Well, to make a credible science fiction conceit or a high concept problem, let's talk about a piece of the action, the Chicago Mobs of the 20s episode of Chicago, or of Trek. So in this episode, the idea that we have the non-interference directive, where you cannot insert yourself, the prime directive of the Star Trek, the Federation is that, or Starfleet, is that you cannot contaminate a culture, no matter what. Now, before they had this rule, 100 years ago, a Federation starship rolls up on a planet, the horizon, and leaves behind a book, Chicago Mobs of the 20s. Now, maybe it's a stretch that these people could even read English or whatever, but they're very, on Sigma Iosha, they mimic. And what this society did, thinks these people, these visitors from the stars gave them this book, they emulated their entire society around this book. Now, the situation was goofy, but the premise that was dealing with how rather than show like, oh, we're going to roll up on a native environment and we're going to bring smallpox and everyone's going to die, well, that's no fun. But how can we talk about the fact, the dangers of polluting a culture with our more advanced culture? So the premise was a great science fiction premise. It was done in a very unique, fun way, but the premise itself had something very compelling behind it. Same with Trouble with Tribbles. And then another humorous episode, which begins with Alice in Wonderland, a giant white rabbit and Alice in Wonderland. Literally Alice. Dr. McCoy sees Alice in Wonderland and a large white rabbit. That episode, Shore Leave, where you're on an amusement park planet, you have an advanced race that's made an entire planet that can read your mind, and whatever you're thinking of, whatever your dreams or fantasies are, they can make them writ large, and you can experience them. And those fantasies, you can even get killed. They'll bring you back from the dead, but we don't know that from the beginning. But there's a great moment when after the episode's over, at the end of the episode, they're trying to make sense of everything that's happened. And Spock has a great line where he says, the more complex the mind, the greater the need for the simplicity of play. Now, again, the best fiction is the most truthful. These are smart, heady concepts presented to us in, let's face it, a rock and roll action adventure allegorical science fiction show that was made in the mid-60s. Star Trek is not high art. It's pop art. But it's very smart pop art that was made by men and women that had lived a life. They'd lived through World War II. They'd lived through the Depression. They had things to say. They weren't just remembering what Joss Whedon wrote back in Firefly or Buffy and Angel. I mean, look at this. We're getting a 4th season Next Generation episode. I mean, a Strange New Worlds episode. And they're proud of this. As I said, they've already done the musical episode. Once More with Feeling. Buffy did it great. And then everyone did musical episodes. Then we had a show, Cop Rock. But they're doing a Muppet episode. And here is my thumbnail. Here's Captain Pike, Anson Mount, turned into a puppet from the Henson Company. And right next to them, right next to that puppet there's Angel. From what, the 5th season episode? Small, I forget what the name of the episode is. But Angel did it 20 years ago. This is what Star Trek Strange New Worlds is giving us. Not only do you have a cast of characters they stole from the original series or were inspired by Khan or whatever, but now they're going back and they're continually stealing. They're doing a Muppet episode. I mean, they did the crossover with Lower Decks. Where's the originality? What are they being paid to write? Hey, I got it. Let's go do the same thing Angel did 20 years ago, because I liked that when I was a kid. Yeah, let's go do that. What are we paying you for? Aren't we paying you to write something? Something new, something unusual? Why don't the writers of Strange New Worlds... We live in the most sci-fi times ever. We have AI coming down the pike. We have biomedical research that's going crazy. We have the James Webb Telescope making us wonder if our universe is inside a black hole. And yet, we're getting low-rent Joss Whedon that isn't even nearly as witty as Joss Whedon's work was 20 years ago. Warmed over, nonsensical relationship drama, interpersonal stuff on a starship that has no military discipline, where Captain Pike has to ask the ladies on the bridge, I don't know, should I do this? What fucking show are we watching here? And they keep giving him money to make this show. Let me read an article about Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Before I read the article, let me see about Super Chats, see what you guys are saying. I've got letters to read as well. So let's see. Jose Taco says, why didn't you put those endings in the Lord of the Rings Special Edition DVD? Oh, what you're talking about is, so when I first saw Return of the King in Peter Jackson's house, the end of Return of the King did show Legolas. We did see Gimli. They just took those out. You know, they were not finished. There's a lot of stuff you haven't seen. There's a lot of roads they went. The Lord of the Rings movies were very iterative, so there's a lot of material that you never saw, but it wasn't up to us. That was not something Peter Jackson wanted us to do. Mad Spectre says, our interview was the highlight of my con. Thanks for the opportunity, Rob. I had a great interview. We did a great interview. I think it's up on the channel. You can watch it. Check it out. Warren 1765 sends in a $50 super chat. You honor me, sir. You're the real deal, RMB. What do you think the producers of Post-TNG to Enterprise think about Kurtzman Trek? Well, they're more kind to it than I am. I mean, they understand the travails of, Ron Moore likes Strange New Worlds. I just talked to him about it. I think they understand how difficult it is to make television. There's other producers, I think, that are perplexed by it because, look, I think, to me, it's a show where the people making it aren't doing the work. They're not writing compelling, they're not writing stories for the ages. Here's the thing about Star Trek that people forget. Star Trek, all the Star Trek shows have been products of their time. And what's really interesting is, for instance, in Star Trek The Next Generation, they added a counselor to the bridge. Somebody who's looking after the mental health of the crew. That was a great addition. Coming out of the 80s where there was a lot of talk about therapy and wellness, and that's, of course, moved on through the decades. But, and the idea of the Enterprise, the Galaxy-class Enterprise was supposed to be out there for much longer than 5 years. And as something that Seth MacFarlane has always pointed out when he waxes rhapsodic about TNG, it's a comfortable place to be. It's more of a comfortable hotel than it is a military vessel, because when people are out there with families for, could be 10 years, could be 20 years, if it was a deep space exploratory vessel, it would need to be comfortable. So there were changes made that were thought about, especially by the designers when Andy Probert was designing the Enterprise D. And Roddenberry thought that, in a way, the Enterprise itself was a work of art. It was a beautiful sculpture. Now, we weren't used to it because the original, like a lot of people think it looks like a giant guppy, or it's the AMC Pacer of starships or whatever. But I think over the years, many people have come to love it. It was too radical for me. I didn't like the lines of it. But once you realize that a ship can be anything in space, it can be like a cube. I've come to really love the Enterprise D, and never more so than its reveal in Picard Season 3, and Terry Matalas and team knew what they were doing. But I think that the writing is very puerile. It's very infantile. I don't feel like I'm watching an adult show. I don't feel like there's any military decorum. They don't even believe in any of that. You've got a bunch of writers that have not convinced me that what goes on. Remember, as I say, the greatest fiction is the most truthful. There's no attempt to make Star Trek Strange New Worlds seem credible. I'll give you an example. I've said this before, but I'll give you like one of the things that they did with Spock when they turned Spock into a human. They have Dr. Mbenga, who was established, again, a character from the original series. They established him as knowing Vulcan medicine. He tells Spock, he gives Spock his harp, his lute. He gives Spock and tells him, you should learn to play this. So, Strange New Worlds, once again, because they have to bogart all of Star Trek history, and badly, they maintain that Dr. Mbenga gave Spock his Vulcan harp that he plays. Well, we know from the 3rd season episode of the original series, Requiem for Methuselah, when they find Flint, Spock sits down in Flint's drawing room at the harpsichord and finds an unknown Brahms waltz. He can read music, and he plays the waltz. Well, as we know from Next Generation on, the Vulcan language is very musical. Spock learned, obviously, you must infer, based on the original series, that Spock he reads Earth music. The man's probably a musical prodigy. He's been studying music since he was a little kid. Did they overtly say that in the original series? No. But by showing him sitting down at a harpsichord, an 18th century instrument or even earlier from Earth, and he can play it and read music written in musical notes from Earth, he can sight read and play like a maestro, he knows music. Oh, but Strange New Worlds is like, well, Rob, he's not the Spock we know and love. Well, give me a break. Yeah, he is. He already went through Starfleet Academy. His mother was, he's not some, they've tried to turn him into fucking Sheldon from Big Bang Theory. It's the dumbest shit ever. The way they've written Spock on Strange New Worlds, that in itself tells you just how dumb these writers are. And I know people enjoy it because they like that humor. I get it. There's nobody who likes more unsophisticated humor than science fiction fans. I know I'm one of them. And we do like our goofy humor. That's why people love Lower Decks. But the way they've treated Spock, he is written in the most puerile, infantile way possible. Spock is the man. He's not developmentally challenged. He doesn't have a mental problem. It's all this self-insert bullshit you can't have unextraordinary people writing an extraordinary person if they have unextraordinary imaginations. You just can't. And that's what we get. We get people that they're not capable of writing great things. They can't write great stories. They don't have the concepts. They haven't read science fiction. They can't deal with trying to make something better than they have to go back to tropes. I'm spitting romantic bullshit to Joss Whedon. And by the way, Joss Whedon wrote incredible characters. He elevated high school and college. And yet those writers go back and look and they diminish adult characters and make them all feel like they're junior high school students. Where's the sophistication? You think about an episode like Balance of Terror. Kirk, he could cause a war if he makes a mistake. And there's a great moment where Kirk is alone with McCoy and he's sitting there and McCoy knows he's being chewed up inside. And Shatner's like, why me? And you see the weight of the world on his shoulders. They've never been able to give you that moment. And then Dr. McCoy gives him one of the great speeches of all time in Star Trek. In this galaxy, there's a mathematical probability of how many million Earth-type planets. You got to see it. If you've never seen it, go watch Balance of Terror. It's great. But listen, thank you, Warren, 1765. Fearless Wolf, 5928 says, Pike turned the Enterprise into a floating PBS special. Spock's on the bridge like the Count. One prime directive violation. 2 prime directive violations. 3 prime directive violations. Yeah. It's not much more sophisticated than that. By the way, thank you. That's also very nice. A very $20 super chat. Thank you very much. Mike Gallagher, 2142, has been a member for 17 months. Thank you for that. The Groove 14 says, I hear OG Star Trek series inspired people to become doctors, scientists, and engineers. What does new Star Trek inspire you to do? Rant on the internet about how shitty it is. I don't think new Star Trek is inspiring at all. You know, they say the thing about it is Star Trek, modern Star Trek is really, they're trying to figure out what they've been trying to do since 2009 is figure out a way to make Star Trek appeal to young people. That's their whole deal. How can we make Star Trek appeal to young people? Well, you know how they've decided to do it? By making it stupid. Because our general education level in this country, college students can't read books because they don't have attention spans anymore. That's not just me saying it. Read articles in the Atlantic. Star Trek was a show that was originally created to punch up. Star Trek expected its audience to be smart. The current creators of Star Trek are expecting their audience to be dumb. They're writing Star Trek for the lowest common denominator. They're not writing... my God, we live in a science fiction world where there are so many moral and ethical dilemmas just about research alone. When was the last time you watched a modern episode of Star Trek that really made you think? And if it really made you think, it was probably ripping off an original series episode or ripping off Ursula K. Le Guin. And they wonder, you wonder why. The Groove 14 says, did you see the teaser for Starfleet Academy? Oh, we're going to get to that. Where do I stand on that show right now? Okay. One of my favorite subgenres of things that I love to watch are stories set in schools. When I was a kid, again, in the latter half of the 1970s, I hadn't seen the movie yet. There was a movie called The Paper Chase. And it was about Harvard law students. And in it, the great John Houseman, who I love, he played Professor Kingsfield. And he was a battle axe of a professor, but he was the greatest professor. And it was because he knew more than you did. And the idea was, and he believed in the Socratic method of teaching. Questioning, answering. Just go look up Professor Kingsfield, Paper Chase, on YouTube. Socratic method. And you'll get a great... But think about it. I loved whether it was School Ties, whether it was the Dead Poets Society, whether it was Alan Parker's Fame and the TV version of Fame, Freaks and Geeks, The Social Network, stories about school, The Breakfast Club. I loved stories about teachers and the effect they can have on students. Good Will Hunting. And if I was going to pitch a Starfleet Academy series, it would be about young people that are being shaped by the experiences and the knowledge they're gaining from their wise professors in school. And then you could deal with the interpersonal relationships as well. But I would say Friday Night Lights. It's a show about East Texas football. Or you could say that Friday Night Lights was very Star Trek in its morality. If you made a Star Trek show about East Texas football, it would be Friday Night Lights. And at the core of that was a functioning family and a husband and wife, a father and mother that were terrific. They were the sage-like people. You loved them. And the show kind of revolved around them and the family, and all the characters were trying to do good. That's what I would say. You look to those shows to make a Starfleet Academy series. You make a Professor Kingsfield. I'm not saying rip it off, but maybe I should have. What you should do, guys, because you rip everything else off, you uncreative hack writers, go rip off John Houseman's Professor Kingsfield. Make that guy the core. That's the guy. That's your, if you need another, that's your Yoda, Professor Kingsfield. Or look at Alan Parker's Fame. Look at some of the teachers. And if you want a fucking villain, look at Whiplash. Look at J.K. Simmons in Whiplash. There's your villain. I mean, stories about school, stories about, and you can go back into history. That's what a Starfleet Academy show should have been about. Well, if you look at the trailer for Starfleet Academy, it's not that. We're getting the Harry Potter, Joss Whedon light. I mean, they give you, again, why they think Star Trek is all about these speeches with platitudes in them, when there was only really a few in Star Trek. And they think that that's what Star Trek is all about. Let's have somebody give a half-baked, inspiring speech about we're pushing beyond the levels or beyond the boundaries of the galaxy to be the best we can be. And yet you make all these people idiots. It's so weird. Like if you're gonna go, shit, man, I fucking rip off Donna Tartt's The Secret History. There's a book. I know it's hard. You got to read a book. God forbid. Maybe it's a book on tape. Read The Secret History and make the philosophy professor. But these guys, no, let's rip off Harry Potter. But these guys, no, let's rip off Harry Potter. And they're like, the teachers are a part of Harry Potter too. Yeah, just like Dead Poets Society, just like many other things were. Good Will Hunting, Lords of Discipline, Social Network, Fame, Freaks and Geeks. There's so many great shows about being in school, great teachers. Easy A with Emma. Look at the great shows about teachers and teachers as mentors. Stand and fucking deliver. That's what your Starfleet Academy show could have been. But we're not going to get that. Based on that trailer. What the fuck was that trailer? That trailer, you have Holly Hunter delivering a speech when what you should have been doing was concentrating, what are your students like? And at the end, you have Paul Giamatti. Get this. Paul Giamatti is a half Tellarite, half Klingon? Well, there's an episode I want to see. Bow, chicka, bow, bow. I mean, it's not enough to believe that a human and a Vulcan can mate, but a Tellarite and a Klingon? How's that going to work? Who apparently knows the theme from Star Trek and whistles it. He whistles while he works. Anyway, I'm going to get to these articles. Captain Robert April has been a member for 36 months. Royston Bailey. TNG may have violated canon, but the scripts were good. Yeah, but they kept it. They kept it straight, sort of. What did I think of Star Trek Prodigy? The Groove 14 asks. Probably the best of the modern Star Trek shows. I think it's a worthy successor. I think it worked, even though at first I was sort of against it. But it did turn out to be quite the show. I thought it was quite a great show. The Grey Istar says Star Wars being in the mediocre hands of Favreau, Filoni, and Trek in the hands of Akiva. Ugh, what a sad state for our favorite franchises. Yeah, but you know what? As I was talking to Ron Moore about For All Mankind, which in my mind is a Star Trek sequel show, if you look at the pedigree of the writers of these different shows, like the pedigree of Foundation, you've got like the David Goyers and the Ron Moores, and then you look at the pedigree of Star Trek. I mean, the other showrunner, Henry, on Strange New Worlds, look at where he comes from. And anyway, let me read these articles. Let me get to these articles. Both of them appeared in Trek movie. So, and of course, they can't wait to... I'm just going to get into this. Strange New Worlds showrunners have a name for a follow-up Star Trek series set on Kirk's Enterprise. And boy, it's not like I heard this name when I was reading comic books in the 80s. Batman Year One, perhaps? But anyway, let's get into that. So, this is by the TrekMovie.com staff. This is news that came out of San Diego Comic-Con. In June, Paramount renewed Strange New Worlds for a 5th and final season. Since then, co-creator Akiva Goldsman and co-showrunner Henry Alonzo Myers have indicated they're interested in doing a follow-up show. At San Diego Comic-Con, the executive producers revealed the name they have in mind and even looked to fans to help pitch the show to new owners of Paramount. Oh, great. They're even stealing. They want the fans to write in like Bijo Trimble. After the second season of the original series was going to be its last, they famously had a letter writing campaign to save Star Trek, so they want fans to do that today. How original. Star Trek Year One. Again, startlingly original. we comic book fans, how many comic books have done their year 1 miniseries or year 2 miniseries? Akiva Goldsman started his tenure with Trek during the 2nd season of Discovery. Yeah, what did you guys do to Section 31? Yeah. As a lifelong fan of Star Trek, he was excited to explore the era before Star Trek the original series, and behind the scenes, he pushed the idea of launching a spin-off show about Captain Pike's Enterprise, which became Strange New Worlds. On stage at Comic-Con yesterday, Goldsman talked about his journey and where he wants to go next. We started having this idea of those great lost years that exist in all of our headcanon and ancillary canon, but had never really gotten much of a chance to be on screen. No, but as you pointed out, ancillary canon, there is a series of Lost Years books. And since you already ripped off Dorothy Fontana for Rebecca Romaine's character's backstory from her one Star Trek novel, Vulcan's Glory, from the late 80s, why not just go and rip off those Star Trek books? You're not certainly beyond it. So what we've tried to do is try and reach back to Pike's Enterprise and instill in it the kind of storytelling values we have today and bring us right up to Kirk's first day on the job. His first day on the job, he's been on the job. Kirk was on the job. Your Kirk was not on Tarsus 4, rescuing kids. You know, if you really wanted to do the kind of show you're talking about, you should go read the Reeves-Stevens Star Trek novel, Collision Course, that they wrote with William Shatner. That's a much better version of a young Kirk and Spock than was ever in Star Trek 09 or the swill that you've been peddling for, well, since 2017. And that is our hope, and that is our plan, and we plan to get you there. And if you like us enough, you just write, Dear Skydance and Paramount, we know you still have the sets. Don't you want to make Star Trek Year 1? No. Not with you guys as showrunners. Not with what you've served up already. Do you think people are going to be watching this show in 25 years? Do you think this show is going to inspire people? It's not going to inspire anybody to work on a ship. I mean, if you're captain of the ship, you're certainly not, you don't really know your job. And apparently you throw a lot of dinner parties for your underlings. The name Year 1 appears to indicate the new show would be set during the first year of Kirk's famed 5-year mission. In his recent Trek movie interview, Goldsman also talked about how Strange New Worlds would wrap up with Kirk's first day in command of the USS Enterprise. And he pointed out that the first produced canonical episode of the original series, Where No Man Has Gone Before, was not Kirk's first mission, nor does it feel like Kirk's second mission. It's clear he sees plenty of room for more stories set on Kirk's Enterprise before TOS. Yeah, but they won't be original. They'll be ripped off from everywhere else you're ripping off stories from. Whether it's Joss Whedon, whether it's Dorothy Fontana, whether it's Ursula K. Le Guin, whether it's Gene L. Kuhn. I mean, how many original episodes of Strange New Worlds have there been where you don't reference other people's characters and other people's work? I mean, my God, if there wasn't the original series, if there wasn't all these people that had already done all your heavy lifting, you wouldn't have a show. You haven't created... Lon Noonien Singh still has to be Khan's great-great-great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter who run afoul of xenomorphs. I mean, my God. It's not the first day on the job. Fundamentally, there are relationships that already exist. How do they happen? And obviously, we have the opportunity for Sulu, and we have the opportunity for McCoy in A Longer Life, and the opportunity for Chekhov. So it would be awesome to be able to continue. I don't even want to talk about Chekhov, but, you know, second season, okay. As noted by the producers, they have the sets and much of the classic TOS cast already in place, including Kirk, Spock, Uhura, Chapel, and now Scotty, and even after bringing in a new Dr. McCoy, they still have Dr. Mbenga, who appeared in TOS but not as the chief medical officer. Right. You have an entire show with characters that other people created. In his recent Trek movie interview, Goldsman confirmed that he and co-showrunner Henry Alonzo Myers were preparing to formally pitch this follow-up series, saying, if we can convince people to give us an opportunity to continue these missions, of course, nothing would make us happier. And when the time comes, we will certainly try. No, do or do not. There is no try. But if we look at what you've already produced, you think we want you erasing the original series? I mean, look what you've done to the timeline of Star Trek already. When's the eugenics wars? Where's Khan? Somewhere in an underground bunker in Toronto? At San Diego Comic-Con, Myers told Entertainment Weekly, "We dream it loudly. We like to say vocally that, hey, we have all these really great sets. You guys own them. You make money off them. How about really great fucking stories? Who cares about your fucking sets, dude? Learn to fucking write a script. Learn to write a script. Read some science fiction. Read the goddamn news. Pick up a science journal. You know, in one issue of a science journal, you'll have 10 stories. Just go watch a fucking podcast from anybody talking about science. Read about quantum computing. Come up with something that has something that doesn't have to do with Nurse Chapel and Spock and their romance and, oh, I'm jealous. Jesus Christ. We've got the sets. Yeah, that's what you care about. You have the sets. You know what you don't have? The fucking storytelling acumen to tell us something that's going to be for the ages. God. Write better. We, the audience, deserve better. We deserve better. You know what's funny? Our little let's do a little just as a this is always interesting. Hang on. Henry Alonzo Myers. I would imagine, since he's working on a Star Trek show, he probably has a great pedigree working on a fantasy series, right? Let's see. What are his past writing credits as a producer? Let's go back. Well, he started out on Charmed. He wrote on Charmed. Then he wrote on Crime Scene Investigation. Then he wrote for Ugly Betty. Then he wrote for Chuck. That had kind of a science fiction bent. Then GCB. Then The Carrie Diaries. That's the Sex and the City prequel. Covert Affairs, and, The Magicians. He was on The Magicians. That was the show, a show about magic, which explains the lack of science in modern Star Trek. This is the man who is co-show running Strange New Worlds. I would say, you really, I know Ugly Betty, the 58 episodes that you worked on Ugly Betty, it's a fine show. But you know how to tell stories about Ugly Betty, but do you really know how to tell stories about Kirk, Spock, and McCoy? Because I haven't seen it. Anyway, so yeah, you go right ahead, Henry Alonzo Myers, about talking about how you're going to make money off your sets. Yeah, I'll tell you what. Why don't you sit back and be executive producers, get rid of all the people writing your shows, and go find writers that can write adult programming, that care about science, that care about our future, that are going to write compelling narratives ripped from the headlines, things that matter to us, allegorical tales about our world today in a science fiction action-adventure context. I don't need to see Roger Corby again. I already know all I need to know about him from What Are Little Girls Made Of? And that was in 1966. Trelane, you brought back Trelane. I mean, my God, they're planning a wedding. Give me the wedding in Balance of Terror and what happened there. But no. And then, of course, well, you got to bring in Q2 and make Trelane his son or whatever. I mean, it's so frustrating. It's like, what are you being paid to do? Diminish every classics? I mean, all you've done is diminish. There is not one episode of Strange New Worlds that pluses the original series. There's not one episode that you've done that makes anything better. Every episode, if you're gonna touch on the original series, you better make the original series episode better. Kind of like what they did, in 1996 when they made Trials and Tribulations, a fun episode celebrating the 30th anniversary. And yeah, it's a time travel conceit, but it was such a joyous episode because our Deep Space Nine characters go back in time to the actual Enterprise and interact with the original crew. It was so clever and so well done, and there was such love, and nobody would ever say, yeah, we got these sets. I mean, if they made this show, they would do that same thing, but they would go back in time and pretend they'd have the characters from Deep Space Nine go back to this original Enterprise and redesign it and say it was the original Trouble with Tribbles. I can't even do this. It's so funny to me. I can't even speak normally when I talk about this stuff. This is the one thing in my life that admittedly I don't have control over. But it's so frustrating because it means something, and I see modern Star Trek as a perfect example of everything wrong with our culture. We're so immature that if you're a Republican, you can't talk to a Democrat. I'll tell you something. Have you heard about this? The American Eagle jeans controversy that's happened the last couple of days. So Sydney Sweeney is in these commercials, and it's a funny play on words. She's talking about how she has good genes because she's hot, buxom. What's not to like? And then she's saying, and then talking about the jeans she's wearing. My parents gave me jeans, but her parents had jeans too. And at the end, you have an announcer saying Sydney Sweeney has good genes. Clever, funny. But our modern TikTok audience, a lot of them have been saying that it's delving into eugenics. And they're trying to find something to be outraged about. Well, if you pulled the stick out of your collective asses, you would realize it is just supposed to be funny and amusing. Like when, maybe look into when Brooke Shields did a jeans campaign. Or how about the movie starring Ryan O'Neal, So Fine, about jeans. But no, they're going to talk about these jeans commercials are Nazi propaganda. Let me tell you, you can get any hot person, male or female, of any persuasion. It doesn't matter whether it's, Mike Coulter, who played Iron Fist. I think Mike Coulter is a very exceptional, beautiful specimen of a man. If you put him shirtless in jeans, he could be like, my parents gave me good genes. And the announcer could say, Mike Coulter has good genes. American Eagle jeans. You could put anybody in there. This idea that we have people on TikTok trying to equate this ad campaign into some kind of racially motivated, or they're talking about eugenics, is this is the problem with the modern generation. No sense of humor at all. And it's maddening. The people that watch Star Trek The Next Generation were people that were thoughtful. They go, that speech in the drumhead when Picard says, this is how it starts. A lot of incredible stuff. The people that watch Strange New Worlds are bitching on TikTok about Sydney Sweeney jeans ads being somehow propaganda. This is the problem with our planet. And this is also the problem, I'm sure some of the people that write Star Trek Strange New Worlds feel the same way. It's all, they're self-inserting themselves into these shows. Stop doing that. You're not that interesting. Stop writing these characters as if they are you and your friends, or they're from a Joss Whedon show. Please, stop. You've desecrated a great franchise that stood for intellectual exploration. It stood for representing the future in an interesting way. But the swill that we're getting, and now to get to Star Trek, and look, I haven't seen Starfleet Academy, but again, if somebody asked me, and by the way, people say to me all the time, oh, you're just jealous you're not working on a Star Trek TV show. Listen, I've never done anything in my career. The only time I've worked in television, I've edited an animated series for Netflix, Dota Dragon's Blood, and I directed 5 episodes of the Skinamax show. I do not have the qualifications. I mean, I could kill working on a Star Trek show. I could edit my own episodes. I could direct episodes. I would work with the writing staff. I wouldn't write episodes. But I would hire, I would handpick the best genre writers that work in the industry. But I've never worked in television. I am not equipped, nor do I have the pedigree to work on a TV show. I just don't. And I'm very aware of that. It's fine. It's fine. I haven't done that. So I'm never going to get to work on a Star Trek show. I'm not bitter about this. I got to, as a fanboy, I was a Star Trek consultant in the 90s for Paramount and Viacom. I got to make a movie with William Shatner about people who love Star Trek that I'm particularly proud of. And I got to work on the Star Trek Experience. And I got to work for 3 years making documentaries about people who made Star Trek. So, and I had dinner with Ron Moore Sunday. So it's all good. It's all good. But what I want is this thing that's meant so much to me since I was a little boy. I want it to be good. I want it to mean something to people today. It does not mean anything. We live in a profoundly introspective, everyone's looking at themselves. Everyone is a performance activist. Everybody wants to be reaffirmed on social media. People are not looking outside themselves. To try and appeal to this modern audience is to fail. I understand you want to get an audience. You know how you get an audience to watch a TV show? You make it really fucking good. Really fucking good. Now, I'm not saying that Breaking Bad should be a Star Trek show, but if you look at what Vince Gilligan and his team did for Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, that's what you should aspire to. Aspire to the heights that Star Trek had always aspired to. You are aspiring to the depths. You want to appeal to children. You know what appealed to me when I was 5? Star Trek! Star Trek appealed to me. The idea that you're trying to dumb your shit down, well, not that it could be any dumber than it already is, but what? Because kids are dumb? Why does everybody try and make everybody stupid? Why don't you write the best shit you possibly can? Why don't you write some A-list? You know what kids want? Ironically, do you know what audiences of today, do you know what young audiences of today want? And this is the ironic part. They want Inner fucking Stellar. That's what they want. They want fucking Nolan, man. Kids today, teenagers, young people, people on TikTok, they love Interstellar. You shouldn't be looking at Harry Potter, and you shouldn't be looking at fucking Joss Whedon. You should be looking at Christopher Nolan. You should be looking at Interstellar. You should be looking at The Martian. You should be looking at the upcoming Project Hail Mary. That's where Star Trek's future lies. In something that's smart, not something that makes you want to blow your head off. Why don't you look at that movie? Christopher Nolan's Interstellar. And by the way, Interstellar is not a perfect movie. And I don't even think it's one of Christopher Nolan's best films. But it means a lot to people. That music. Kids like fucking Dune, man. Denis Villeneuve's, look at those things. We want to appeal to audiences of today. Yeah, well, there you go. Well, there it sits. Dune and Interstellar. Go fucking make that and put make it worthy of Star Trek. Those are worthy of Star Trek. Those things are. Why aren't you doing that? Why are you making the dumbest science fiction show ever? Why are you turning the Gorn into xenomorphs? Shit, man, Noah Hawley's going to wipe your asses with his Alien Earth show. Star Trek should be the Tiffany standard. It should be the best science fiction going. And it is not. It can't even live up to the shadow of a TV show that was made in 1966. God, it's so frustrating. I mean, there's so much great science fiction out there. And if you want to do a show about a school, Professor Kingsfield, Dead Poets Society, Donna Tartt's The Secret History. Aspire to the best. Shoot high. You will find your audience. Instead, Akiva Goldsman, the man who wrote and directed Mark Halperin's novel, Winter's Tale. Go ask Mark Halperin what he thinks of Akiva Goldsman's adaptation of his book. Wow. If somebody asked me, Batman and Robin, New Line's Lost in Space. Yeah, I Am Legend, one of the great... I Am Legend. By the way, you know who wrote the original novel of I Am Legend? Richard fucking Matheson. And what did he work on? The original Twilight Zone and the original Star Trek. And look what Akiva Goldsman did to his book. Actually, I kind of like I Am Legend. But why not do the original book? It's frustrating, man. I just expect more of the world. I want the world. And you know what? Star Trek used to be someplace where you could go for entertainment that elevated the viewer's experience. It elevated... Look, you should never be told what to think by entertainment. Entertainment should entertain you, but the best entertainment gives you something to ponder, something to think about. That's the best entertainment. Not entertainment that tells you what to do, not agenda-driven entertainment. And by the way, authors, anybody who tells a story has an agenda. Don't get me wrong. But the great storytellers are smart enough to know that they have to let you make up your mind. Great stories make you think. They make you ponder. You don't forget them. I still think about classic Star Trek stories I saw when I was 5 years old, thinking about them today. You know, Balance of Terror. Or at the end of This Side of Paradise, the Leela Colomi episode where Spock falls in love because he's hit by alien spores. When you get to the end of that episode, Spock says, I know I was happy. That's a fucking killer moment. These people writing modern Star Trek couldn't ever get you there. They couldn't get you there. And they have, as Henry Alonzo Myers says, we have the best sets in the world. Yeah, you do. You got great actors, too. Where you're falling down is your fucking screenplays. Why can't you write? Why can't you read some great science fiction? Why can't you go rip off more stuff? Why can't you watch Christopher Nolan's Interstellar and wonder, why do the kids love this? And they do. And they love Dune. They're not stupid. Do better, man. Do better. I have a letter. I want to read addressing this. Corey Van Castle Cook writes in and says, July 18th, wrote in and says, Dear Rob, I just watched the episode, the second season, the third season, second episode of Strange New Worlds, Wedding Bell Blues. What in the name of Kalis was that shit? I can't believe they pulled a fucking Mr. Destiny in this episode. Yes, because they have to rip off something. At least Jim Belushi and Michael Caine had the decency to be entertaining in that movie. I wanted to gouge my eyes out with a rusty batleth. There's not enough Romulan ale in the galaxy to wipe this travesty from my memory. Everyone associated with this episode should be embarrassed. I'm going to go find a stiff bourbon with lots of ice. Live long and prosper, Rob. Sincerely, Corey Van Castle Cook. Well, yeah, you're right. And I'm right there with you. Plus they had to lean on multiple episodes of Star Trek to get you there. Which is, it's, you know, their raison d'etre, I guess. That's what they have to do. Can't do anything original. God forbid. Why would you do that? Let's see. I got lots of other articles as well to read. Some of them are not Star Trek related, obviously. But let's see what I got. Ooh, there's a lot. Wow, there's a lot because I haven't done a show in a while. Hang on. I know this is scintillating YouTube stuff. Here's one. This comes from wait, this looks like, well, this is a long one. Well, this one is too long. This comes from Paul Stutz. Paul Stutz says, Afternoon, Rob. Subscriber and quarterly supporter here. In response to your offer to submit letters, here's my feelings regarding James Gunn's Superman and the developing Gunn-verse. For me, the main source of resentment to Gunn's Superman is the double standard being applied in reviews. The same components that critics skewered on Snyder over are given a pass in Gunn's version because of corny jokes and a cute dog. Gunn copies the same plot points from Snyder's Man of Steel and Dawn of Justice, and no criticism. I'm sure all those soldiers that he lasered from 1,000 feet up survived like Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. Or the plot holes of Superman getting criticized for interfering in an attack, and then the Justice Gang does the same thing and even has Hawkgirl kill the leader. Or how Ultraman is proven to be much stronger, yet when Superman is hauling into space with the engineer and about to die, Ultraman grabs his foot and now he can't stop him. And the biggest shock is how Gunn could show that innocent civilian getting his head blown off with all those kids in the theater. Even Snyder would not tolerate that. I could go on, but the biggest gripe is how Snyder is fired for not making $1 billion in a hurried-up attempt to catch Marvel, which had a 5-year head start, and yet you and Campia support the idea that it's okay for David Zaslav to have the patience of Job. From the Bible. Oh, I know Job. I want to make a Job movie. And let Gunn just meander until he makes money. That's like telling a basketball coach with Michael Jordan on his team that it's okay if your schemes limit Jordan to 20 points, as long as you only lose by 10 points. That makes no sense at all. Can you imagine what Snyder could have accomplished if he had Zaslav supporting him? I don't have to imagine what Snyder accomplished because I saw 3 movies, including Zack Snyder's Justice League, that finally got finished. And the problem with those movies is, as much as I enjoy Zack Snyder's vision They were not 4-quadrant movies. They just weren't. They didn't have the family audience. And I like those movies a lot, but they are a vision of Superman that I think runs contrary to the mass audience. A lot of people love those movies. I love watching them. I think Man of Steel's great, and I like Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, but I'll tell you something. That's not a movie I'd want kids to see. And, when it comes down to it, they are trying to make money. So we'll see. And by the way, Superman is not done at the global box office. It's been out for, 16 days? I believe it'll probably stay in theaters at least 45. So we'll see where it winds up. And by the way, to compare and contrast box office and money, it's a different time. It's post-COVID. And everyone's trying to adjust for inflation. You know what's funny about the discourse around Superman and Man of Steel? Suddenly everyone is a studio executive, or better yet, a studio accountant. Everyone knows everything about money. Has anyone seen a production budget? There's a lot of other factors that go into studio accounting. Anyway, so it's just the frustration what Gunn is allowed to get away with versus Snyder that causes the most resentment for me personally. From what I've seen from Gunn so far at DC, it makes me wonder who is editing his Guardians movies at Marvel. It appears Kevin Feige may have had more editing input on those movies than indicated. I'm just not a fan of silly, goofy movies, and in some, have a lot of vulgar language and crude sexual content, which was not in any of the Guardians movies. Good luck to those parents trying to tell their kids they can't watch Peacemaker and Lanterns. Take care, and thanks for a rant, and I look forward to Robservations, episode 1051. Also, congrats on your YouTube success. Well, Paul, first of all, great letter, and I want to thank you for writing in. You make very good points. And I would just say that, look, I think that I think both Superman and Fantastic Four suffered from, and I'm sure everybody agreed to this. I don't think James Gunn was being told to do this. I think he did it because he's also the head of DC Studios. I think Fantastic Four and Superman both suffered from they were cut too short. They weren't given time to breathe. You don't ever get a chance. There's not a lot of scenes just between people talking. And, if you think about it, there's the scene in Jaws. The great scene when Murray Hamilton, the Mayor Vaughn, is going in the little ferry with Brody, and it's a wonder. You leave the ferry and they have this conversation. It's a long conversation and they're just talking. It's the moment in Jaws where Murray Hamilton's like, you yell shark, people say, huh? What? Or you yell barracuda, people say, huh? What? You yell shark, and you've got a panic on your hands on the 4th of July. It's like a 5-minute scene where they're just talking, and it's one shot. Neither Fantastic Four or Superman has many moments. My two favorite moments in Superman was the Daily Planet scene where everyone's talking. You could tell Wendell Pierce is totally shortchanged in that movie. Superman was probably 2.5 hours long, but they cut it to be 2 hours. Conventional wisdom. They did the same thing with Fantastic Four. Fantastic Four was the most tested, as I've been told, the most tested of all the MCU films because they wanted to get it right, and it's a perfectly enjoyable movie. But for me, there's not enough humanity in it. There's not enough just scenes where people are talking. Every scene is cut within an inch of its life. There's not a lot of stuff breathing. There's not a lot of contemplation in it. It moves like a gunshot, but where's the memorable moments? The things that we love in movies, take the gun, leave the cannoli. And where's all the memorable lines of dialogue? We all love that. We all love the human interaction. All of our favorite movies have great scenes that we can remember dialogue from. And I think one of the problems, if you go back, I was talking with my business partner, Mike Bodden, today, and he was saying that one of his favorite moments in Captain America, the first Avenger, is when they're trying to take the flag down, and no one can get it. And shrimpy Steve Rogers walks over and undoes the flagpole, and the flag falls down, and he picks up the flag, because officer thinking, that's what he did. And that was a moment that they probably would have cut out of that movie. They're like, you don't really need that. You show that when he throws himself on the grenade, or the beginning of Iron Man. Why do we love Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man? You loved him from the opening moments of Iron Man. When he's in the Humvee and he's talking to the troops, he's like, hey, I want to take some pictures. Sure, let's take some selfies. No gang signs, though. And then, oh, yeah, you can use gang signs. That would have been cut out of today's superhero movies, this summer's superhero movies. You would have just had the Humvee pull up at the test site. They would have tested their thing. But the reason that the MCU works, the reason that there even is an MCU, is because Robert Downey Jr. is so damn charming in the first Iron Man movie. And they were making up dialogue and scenes as they went. You know, you got a lot of humanity in that movie. And it's funny and it's got enough superheroics in it to keep it interesting. But that movie is all about Robert Downey Jr. We are not spending time with Iron Man. You know, we are spending time with that character, that human being. And it's delicious. And the same is true of Star Trek, the original series. Half of what made that show great was the dialogue, the scenes of dialogue, the scenes where Kirk and Spock or McCoy and Spock would have banter. They would talk to each other. Think about Star Trek 4 when they're walking underneath the Golden Gate Bridge and Gillian Taylor pulls up and they talk about going to get Italian. And so does he. You know, they talk about it's a funny scene. Today they would cut that scene out. Somebody would give a note going, that makes the movie too long. But that scene's delicious. It's Kirk and Spock in a funny situation with your guest star, and they have a completely frivolous, comedic conversation about eating Italian food. But it's delightful. Would you ever want to see that gone from a movie? It would be gone today. And people forget we watch stories because they're about us. They're about human beings. We watch stories to learn, to experience, because somewhere out there, even in the best science fiction genre movies, there are moments between human beings or humans and aliens or whatever that we recognize, that have truth in them. The way a young boy can fall in love with his alien companion in E.T. or a dog or something like that. There's truth in all of those things. And if we're just getting the spectacle, we're missing out. And I felt that both Superman and both Fantastic Four were cut to the bone. And we didn't get enough of what I wanted. But, I mean, in terms of giving James Gunn a pass, I would say, look, it's just a different approach. And we are getting a Lanterns, and we are getting a Supergirl. We are getting Peacemaker Season 2. It's going to be interesting to see how it all works together. I'm curious to see Clayface. But you make a lot of good points. So yeah, I want to thank you for writing in, taking the time to write in. That's a good letter. Rodney Fields writes in and says, I have a quick question for you, Robert. I caught an episode of Versus a couple of months back, and you were talking to Chris about a classic anime film series that was one of your favorites. I grew up watching Star Blazers and Speed Racer, but I'd never heard of the anime you guys were talking about. You all described it as an epic space opera similar to Star Blazers in your motto, and from a similar time period. Sorry that's not much to go on, but I'm hoping it's enough. Thanks so much for any help in tracking this down. Sincerely, Rodney Fields. Oh, I can tell you exactly what it is. My very favorite animated Japanese anime of all time. The English title is Legends of the Galactic Heroes. Now, they're remaking it, but the original 110 episode OVA series was made over almost 10 years. And it is basically about two warring galactic empires. One was based on like 18th century Prussia, and the other is based on democratic France. And it's very hard to find in the United States. But I'm going to do you a solid here, because somebody, I hope they don't take it down, put it all up on, oh, here it is. Here's the playlist. I'll put it in the live chat if you're seeing this right now. So I'll put that in the live chat. This is the playlist for Legends of the Galactic Heroes. It's also one of the great science fiction series of all time. Again, it's based on a series of 10 Japanese science fiction novels. So it's quite amazing, and I'm going to drop it into the chat. There's a link there's 4 seasons of it. He put them together. So there's season 1, part 1, season 1, part 2. So if you want to see it, there it is. I just put it in the live chat. And you know what I'll do? I'm live, but I do have his email. So I'll just write him back right here. I'll write a response to his email, and I'll send him this link in case he doesn't see it. Maybe he'll see that I'll just be Rodney. Here you go. Here you go. The entire series. See, this is service. Yeah, and there he has it. So that's the entire playlist. So there you go. Why not? But that's a great show. I love it. And if you love science fiction and you love epic storytelling, it is epic. So check that out. Let's see what other letters can I read now. We'll see. It's funny. I should have pulled these up before, and I didn't. Don't worry, I'll get your super chats soon too. Oh, I messed up. I'm trying not to. Let's see, Superman. This is actually. I like this episode. This is an interesting letter. Let's see, is it too long to read? Might be too long to read. I'm going to read it anyway because I like this letter. This comes to me and comes to you from Royce Yaka. Royce Yaka. And I don't know if that's his real name or not, but if it is his real name, kudos to his parents because Royce Yaka is a great name. First time, long time. I happened to cross Robservations on YouTube a couple of years ago. I realized that you were Rob Burnett of Free Enterprise, which I own on DVD. I have been watching ever since. I met you in person at your True Noir panel at San Diego Comic-Con last year. The short Asian guy that wished you a happy birthday wearing a Kamen Rider version 3 skater t-shirt. I remember that. As a fellow Gen Xer, only a couple of years younger than you, and having watched many of your Robservations, I have concluded that we launch our Vipers from the same launch bay. Since almost a year ago at the San Diego Comic-Con, I've been formulating my thoughts on fandom and how it relates to our favorite IP, Star Trek, and food. When I try to explain my frustration to friends who are not deep fans of Star Trek, they don't understand. So I thought of relating it to food. And here it is. Infinity and Jelly Donuts. This is the title of an episode from Season 8, Episode 1, Magnum P.I. So Infinity and Jelly Donuts is an actual title of Magnum P.I.? I guess so. Time has little to do with Infinity and Jelly Donuts. The same can be said about fandom as it relates to your favorite IP. Being a fan of a movie or a television series is subjective as it is in any art form, much like food and drink are subjective. Growing up with Star Trek, like you, the series evolved with us. Just like the different dishes of various cultural foods that we were exposed to over the years, our tastes can change and grow. Where we grew up can also affect the foods we like and dislike. The Star Trek franchise is like your favorite restaurant. The restaurant may have evolved over the years, but had the same owner, chef, visionary. Now, picture that restaurant closing its doors. To make things simple, we'll make it a fast food chain. In-N-Out. Hypothetically, In-N-Out closes and ceases to exist for a few years. Then a nostalgic entrepreneur, seeing the monetary potential of the chain, brings it back. He has nothing to do with the original owner, but in the chain restaurant business. You know where I'm going. The new In-N-Out keeps the original menu in name, but is now pro-healthy, and a vegetarian menu is added. Impossible Burgers. It's not bad, but it's not the same. Tastes great for vegetarians. In this new hypothetical iteration, the SoCal car culture theme is kept, but the staff uniforms are now unisex. Guys can now wear trucker hats and girls can wear the paper hat if they want to. The only original concepts kept are the spread and the secret menu. The new chain is successful due to the lack of vegetarian representation in the food market and the nostalgia aspect, especially with Southern California car culture and drive-in aspects. However, the thing that made the original great, subjective, is no longer there. By the way, I had an In-N-Out 4x4 mustard fried today. So when I complain about the new In-N-Out, the people who like the new chain and the new owner attack me as being anti-vegetarian. I like vegetables, but what made my old 4x4 animal style tasty, I had a 4x4 today, was the balance of real beef, lettuce, melted cheese, sautéed onions, and spread. Continuing with the food analogy, I will pull from an Adam Carolla theory on party sandwiches. If you're hosting a company event and you're providing sub-sandwiches for 100 employees and you find that half the sandwiches ordered are vegetarian, you end up with waste. Yes, the guy assigned to put in the order was sensitive to possible vegetarians in the group, but also lazy. A quick employee poll would have been more practical. So with post-2009 Star Trek, I can see how people like it and dislike it. Generational age, how much of a fan you are, and your experience with the franchise over time all come into play. Rob, I agree with all your insights and critiques of modern Trek. To me, it's like my new In-N-Out. People who never had the old may even love the new vegetarian In-N-Out, only remembering the essence and image of In-N-Out. Again, subjective. But back to new Trek. I found myself watching certain emotional scenes and getting misty-eyed, but that just shows that the writers know how to write dramatic scenes. Do they? No. Do they? These scenes could easily be placed in an ordinary nighttime soap. Well, you nailed it there. They don't know how to make a great overarching Star Trek story. I am not a gatekeeper. I've just experienced the entire legacy of Star Trek differently. If I tell you why new Trek is not good, I'm not telling you that you shouldn't like it. Absolutely. I'm telling you I don't like it. Yes. I mean, to be fair, Star Trek Strange New Worlds is going to be the first Star Trek some people come to. Just like Lower Decks, just like Prodigy, just like Discovery, just like Star Trek 09. Star Trek does not need me to defend it. Great Star Trek is self-evident. My problem is, with all the self-evident great Star Trek, why are the custodians of the franchise now not able to make Star Trek that's even greater? We live in a time where we are getting some of the best television ever. Over the last 25 years, whether we're getting, look at what Ron Moore did, look at the difference between 1978's Battlestar Galactica and what Ron Moore and David Icke did with the show and their entire writing staff. Now, it's not people's cup of tea. I know that there's a lot of people that swear by the original Galactica, but look, the original Galactica was never great. It was not great. No one looks back at Galactica and says, I know people might like it, and there's nostalgia glasses, and there were certain episodes I liked. You know, I did like the whole Experiment in Terra storyline, and I did like the whole Count Ibley, Pegasus arc, and all that. But Ron Moore and David Icke's Battlestar Galactica series elevated the concept of Galactica way beyond what it originally was. That's what we should expect from modern Star Trek. That's what we should expect for any IP that's been around for a long time. Why aren't we getting the Breaking Bad and the Better Call Saul of Star Trek? Why isn't somebody, because I understand, because the people that can write at that caliber are not going to go write Star Trek. The people that are writing Star Trek now have a job. Henry Alonzo Myers has a job. I was on The Magicians. Now I'm on Star Trek. I was on The Carrie Diaries. Now I'm on Star Trek. The people writing Star Trek, it's a gig. I don't begrudge them for taking the gig. I do begrudge the owners of the franchise for not aspiring to more. I do begrudge the people like at Secret Hideout. I begrudge a producer like Alex Kurtzman to not go out and find the greatest science fiction television writers he can find. I mean, but anybody who had a hand in writing Star Trek Into Darkness, which is easily the greatest Star Trek Into Darkness is the most awful big budget science fiction movie ever made. Ever made. The level of stupidity in that movie. I mean, I thought Star Trek 09 was already dumb. When you have your big bad villain who literally has traveled in time into the past, and he's mad because a nova destroyed his homeworld. He has it in his grasp, if he understood anything, if he wasn't such a dumb villain, to take technology from the future, go to his homeworld and say, hey, 100 years hence, the Hobus star is going to explode and destroy our homeworld. How do I know this? Because I came from the future with my mining ship that has partial Borg technology. Does he ever think to do this? No, he's mad about a disaster that happens 100 years in the future that is within his power to prevent from happening. But instead, he's going to stay mad even though he's traveled through time. What? Doesn't the Romulan Star Empire have the equivalent of time travel movies? Didn't he watch the Romulan version of, I don't know, Back to the Future? Is he so stupid to not understand that when I went back in time, I can prevent my homeworld from being destroyed? Does he do it? No. Probably because they cut the scene out where the Klingons take them and incarcerate them for 25 years, which is equally stupid because what have they been doing all this time? They could have gone to, I don't know, Romulus and prevented the Hobus Star from going supernova with the red matter, but don't know. Those two films collectively, actually, I'd even put in Beyond, but Star Trek 09 and Star Trek Into Darkness, if you start to break down the plots of those movies, are two of the dumbest science fiction movies ever made, but Into Darkness takes the cake. Star Trek 09 is at least palatable. But my God, what a dumb villain. What a dumb villain. Nero. You know, because he's a Romulan from Rome. Let's call him Nero. Anyway. I'm not a gatekeeper. I'm sorry I went on this tirade. I'm not a gatekeeper. I've just experienced the entire legacy of Trek differently. If I tell you why New Trek is not good, I'm not telling you shouldn't like it. I'm telling you I don't like it. I am telling you shouldn't like Star Trek 09 and Star Trek Into Darkness. I am. I'm saying you should have better taste in that. You should really look what's going on. Don't be bamboozled by Carl Urban's impression of DeForest Kelley, which is admittedly great, and I love Carl Urban. But those movies are abhorrent in their plotting and their science fiction. They've just got a great cast. I'm telling you, I don't like it. If you take it that way, you might be narcissistic. If a 20-year-old told me he hates the original series, I wouldn't take it as a personal attack. I would just ask why they did. I understand why a 20-year-old doesn't like Star Trek. The people making Star Trek now don't like Star Trek. They don't. They're not fans. They don't like Star Trek. Akiva Goldsman will tell you, well, you know, I went to conventions when I was a kid. Yeah, and here's my Oscar. I'm great. Yeah, really? Really? You wrote and directed Winter's Tale. I understand you got an Oscar for writing A Beautiful Mind, but that's because Ron Howard directed it. I mean, you had an opportunity. Mark Halperin, Winter's Tale. Look what you did. Look what you did. I wouldn't have let you anywhere near Star Trek after watching that movie. I mean, my God, a soldier of a great war. Jesus. Anyway. Back to my food analogy. As a 22-year Navy veteran, I have met younger and older people from all walks of life in the service. One time, I took two Navy friends, one originally from the Midwest and another from Florida, to the San Francisco Bay Area on a weekend trip. Having grown up in the Bay Area, I played tour guide. They wanted some Chinese food, so being originally from the Bay Area and exposed to great Chinese food, I asked Hunan, Cantonese, or Szechuan. I got blank stares back. One said someplace with crab rangoon. I gave the same blank stare back. To them, where they grew up, they were only exposed to Chinese-American food. Both had not yet been to Hong Kong on a Westpac cruise or to a major city with a large Chinatown. History tangent. Chinese-American food developed from the early Chinese immigrants who came for the gold rush, railroads, etc. It's what I call generic Chinese food. Chop suey and the aforementioned crab rangoon, for example. There are even influences within the states, i.e. Chinese-American Mississippi food, as we saw in Sinners. Being of Japanese-American descent, it's like Benihana representing Japanese food. So when I say I don't much like modern Trek, I'm saying I am not satisfied with Panda Express or P.F. Chang's. I'm in the mood for Hong Kong-style chow mein from my favorite Cantonese restaurant in San Francisco. If you only know chow mein from Panda Express or P.F. Chang's and you love it, great. I just know there's something different and better. Subjective. No, it's not subjective. Objectively, it is better because it's objectively more authentic. And you're getting a bastardized version of the original with P.F. Chang's and Panda Express. In this case, with Star Trek, I only have Panda Express at the moment. Fusion cuisine. Some are great, some are bad. I see reboots like Fusion cuisine. A new restaurateur wants to make a mark, blend some cultures together and make something great. The reboots of Hawaii Five-0 and Magnum P.I. are some examples of tolerable remakes. They're in no way better than the originals, but it's easy to forgive. The classic Hawaii Five-0 lasted 12 seasons and was the typical police drama for its time. The new 5-0, 10 seasons, made it more of a cop buddy comedy, modern quick-cut procedural with levity and humor attached. They were both cop shows at their core. Magnum P.I., again the original, the OG, is 10 times better, but the new one was watchable. Changing Higgins to a female character, creating an underlying romantic tension for Magnum. Both shows use the old shows as a lazy platform to quickly establish a nostalgic fan base and to shorthand the backstories for the main characters. In the new Magnum, they further use the OG series as a crutch with the many supporting characters as well, i.e. Colonel Buck Green became Colonel Captain Green. James Remar is no Lance Legault. That said, some of these supporting characters were seen once and thrown away. Lieutenant Maggie Poole. Some were developed but in name only, not resembling the original character. Luther Gillis, Eugene Roach, Ken Jeong. I think both reboots would have been just as good as a continuation series with new characters. I didn't forget Battlestar. The only critique for me is the modern slang. Not enough OG words like micron, yaran, ambrosia, etc. I believe it was a mandate to have no contractions and formal wording, i.e. father instead of dad, as well. Also, too much modern Navy terms. I prefer the generic use of military ranks and terminology, i.e. colonial warrior, instead of Viper pilot with a call sign. It keeps the people of the 12 colonies feeling like they're not from Earth. All in all, a good example of a reboot. What makes modern Trek frustrating is that it's not really a reboot. It's allegedly in the same universe, sans JJ's Kelvin universe, which makes it tolerable. Final take. In my In-N-Out anthology, the new owner is introducing vegetarian options. As it relates to New Trek, I feel it's changing into a vegetarian restaurant. Nothing wrong with a vegetarian In-N-Out, just don't call it In-N-Out. In my opinion, if you alter the menu too much away from the original that you're building upon, it's no longer the same. Keeping the logo, the outward physical look and style is just nostalgia. Think Demolition Man and Taco Bell. To the people of San Angeles in the future, it might be fine dining, but to us in the 90s LA, we want Taco Supreme. As fans, we like what we like. If we disagree with other fans on the direction the IP is evolving, well, that's subjective taste. Being a fan means we can critique because we have liked and supported the franchise. Showing our dislike is not gatekeeping. It's not in our control. Our negative critiques are not personal attacks on the fans that like New Trek. If you go to a restaurant and you don't like the food, it's a matter of taste. Now, if the chef blames the negative reviews of his restaurant on the patron's taste and not the food, either his ego is too big or he's only listening to the customers who like it. It's up to the restaurant to change or not. If the majority of customers dislike the food, then it will go out of business. Fortunately or unfortunately, the Star Trek franchise today will go on as long as there are fans. Hopefully in the future, the Star Trek I like will be Hopefully in the future, the Star Trek I like will be watching. Hopefully in the future, the Star Trek I like watching will be like having my 4x4 animal style from In-N-Out. Thank you, Snyder family. That's my take on fandom and how it relates to food and criticism. Now, criticism as it relates subjectively and exposure. Rob, I feel like you and I are foodies as it relates to the television, movie, and cinema art form. We grew up at a time, and we were fortunate to have access to many movies and shows since the golden age of the medium. Through reruns, physical media, and just being born when the catalog of movies and television shows were relatively small compared to now. Black and white, Technicolor, 3 networks, movie houses, the Cineplex. We were exposed to the medium with the technology of the time and grew with it. Today, like you've mentioned before, many young people can't watch old movies and TV shows. It's hard for them because they didn't experience nor get exposed to it because of few or no other options. To my food analogy again, there are people who don't like seafood. And if you grew up on a small Pacific island at the turn of the 20th century, you probably like seafood. Today, with trade and refrigeration on that small island, you could have grown up not liking seafood since you have options. If you don't like seafood, you probably have a different opinion about a seafood restaurant than someone who doesn't. Can you have an opinion on that restaurant? Sure. Should we take your aversion to seafood into account? Yes. Can you call yourself a foodie if you don't like fish? Yes. Let's hope you have a diverse palate and no other dislikes. I go down this path to emphasize the link between subjectivity or fan criticism with level of exposure. Many people across the board who liked the first Mission Impossible movie with Tom Cruise were probably not true fans of the show. Their level of exposure was low. They probably just have a passing knowledge or have seen a couple of episodes. I say this while on the surface it's a good movie that launched the movie franchise, but I understand the disappointment of the original TV actors and many fans had with it. The confidence scheme element and the teamwork were lacking, and above all, Jim Phelps is a traitor. It's like having Admiral Kirk turning out to be a Romulan spy in Star Trek the Motion Picture. If you knew nothing of the TV show, you probably didn't care about that plot twist. If I relate this to Superman, it's difficult. I don't know the comic books. My exposure is purely with the old 50s TV show and the movies. So in my experience with the hero, I like the movie. Sometimes it's expectation. Many fans of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. were disappointed with the Guy Ritchie movie. They were expecting the world already established in the TV series. I enjoyed the pre-formation of the U.N.C.L.E. organization, the origin story. I did too. I know that many people who didn't know that it was based on a TV show enjoyed the movie as well. As fans, our criticism comes from our passion for the particular IP. It's subjective, not objective, due to likes, dislikes, feelings, experience, and exposure. As a fan, I can like something that another fan hates and vice versa. Yes. Just don't take it personally, like some kind of an attack. Last relation to food. If I don't like a particular Japanese restaurant, I'm not saying I don't like Japanese food or the Japanese culture in general. Maybe it's because I grew up there and it's not as authentic to me. Maybe it used to be good, but they changed chefs and the quality changed and my expectations were changed. Either way, it's my opinion, and it's not why this happens. I don't know if it's my software. I don't even know how long I've... Did anybody hear any of that letter? I have no idea. Wow. That's a bummer. It's not the network cable, but it's something that has been happening. I always think somebody's, you know what? I'm going to go back and I'm going to take that letter and I'm going to read it and make it its own thing. So anyway, really liked that letter. Thanks for writing in, Royce. It was great. But you know what? I'm going to go reread that letter, do a better job, and turn it into its own thing because it's cool. Let me go and see. Hang on. I just want to catch up and look and see what you guys are saying. What have I missed out on? There's been tips here. And let me go back. And wow, there's a lot of stuff I have to jump into here. So, the Science and Reason Lover sends in a $20 tip. That's very nice. And says, you were right. Project Hail Mary was a fantastic read. I just finished it yesterday. Project Hail Mary is what Star Trek should be like. I'm not saying that it has to be exactly, but in terms of the tone, in terms of what it has to say, and people will see. People are going to like it like they like Interstellar, like they like The Martian. And I'm glad you read it. It means a lot when people pick up something and read. And thank you for supporting the channel in that way. Sunny D says, the Old Fashioned is the official Comic-Con drink. Ron Moore had 2 along with us. The Space Station San Diego Comic-Con, we have got to have the Shuttle Bay experience you always talk about. Horace, Corey, Julian, Kev, and the Major. Till our next adventure, bag whiskey is the best. Sunny D, here's to the king of squirting. You know, I'm embarrassed, but these Knob Creek, you know, I whenever I go to the grocery store, people always point out, they're like, oh, they make a lot of these premixed cocktails, which I've tried them all, and I don't like any of them nearly as much as I like this. I don't know what they do, but this is dope. I know it should be poured over ice. I know I'm a heathen. I know. But our Post-Geek Singularity crew, Sonny, we did it up right. And Ron Moore spent a lot of time with us. It was amazing to talk to him. He was terrific. That was incredible. Yeah, I spent time talking to a guy who made Real Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica and For All Mankind and Outlander, and is now working on the God of War series. Huh. Fascinating. And a Mission Impossible movie. So let's see. Where are we at? I got super chats. The Groove 14 and Robert April, we talked about that. talk about Star Trek. Ah, the fellow attorney says, is that MAC lipstick that you're wearing? No, it's Prescriptives. You know what's funny about that? I still know her. We're still friends on Facebook. Trisha, that's a scene, our Mexican waitress in, if you haven't seen Free Enterprise, hopefully I'll get my movie out. It's been out of print for 20 years. I think it would do better now than ever before, and I'd get canceled. But yes, I wrote and directed a feature film that stars Emmy winners Eric McCormack and William Shatner, Deborah Van Valkenburg from The Warriors, Audie England, who's Peter Lenkoff's wife, who wrote Demolition Man and did the new Hawaii Five-0 TV series. Royston Bailey says, how about that Gemma Dar, eh? Well, yeah. Jedi2432 says, hey, Rob, keep up the great work. I remember as a kid watching reruns of Star Trek The Next Generation, and I'm sad kids will never get to see smart, intellectual sci-fi. Well, you know, even with all the mad shit I talk about this, what's very interesting is when we were younger, we did not have the very platform I'm speaking on right now. We were looking out. We had to go get things. Now, what's really interesting is you're seeing right now user-generated content. Kids are now they're looking to other kids. They're looking to other people online. They're not looking to entertainments like Star Trek. They don't have the attention spans, for one thing. So it's just a different... I mean, I love watching reaction videos. I watched a reaction video. These two guys were listening to Hotel California for their first time, and then Bohemian Rhapsody. They listened to that. It's a different world. But eventually it all comes around. There's now so much material out there to see. It's so fragmented, but the good stuff will always speak for itself. I think people will always find it. Look, what I find one of my favorite things is just to see younger girls, not because they're younger girls, but seeing younger girls discover the original series. Like Bunny Tails Reacts went through the entire original series. And it's interesting to me to watch a female perspective on, say, Star Trek The Motion Picture. Because there were always female fans, but fandom was predominantly male. The audience for this channel is predominantly male. So I'm not putting down our sisters at all, you know, of all shapes, sizes, colors, creeds, but it has been an interesting and a new phenomenon over the past 35 years to see as many women come into the fandom via video games, via anime, via comics. So now it's everybody's reached parity. You go to Comic-Con now, there's every different kind of person under the sun. It was not like that when I was younger. So when I can watch a woman react to Star Trek The Motion Picture and she finds it deeply affecting because she brings no baggage to it when she watches it, and the same is true of young guys, but young guys are more steeped in fandom. But seeing a female reaction to Star Trek The Motion Picture, especially somebody who's watching it today, like popcorn in bed or something, the reactions are very surprising. And for the most part, I think those movies now are more well-liked, especially by female audiences, than they were when they first came out, which I think is interesting. The Greyest Star says, Star Wars being in the mediocre hands of Favreau and Filoni, and Trek in the hands of Akiva. Ugh, what a sad state for our favorite franchises. Yeah, I know, I already read that, but it again, the problem is, you know, it's hard enough to get a television job, and I am sympathetic to that. I am. But when we're getting great television, hell, even Foundation Season 3 is light years beyond. And I can, the relative merits on whether or not it's a great adaptation of Asimov is one thing, but the way they incorporated his robot mythos into that as well, amazing. But when you have those shows, look, For All Mankind, is For All Mankind perfect? No, but it's fucking great. The actors are great. The structure of the show is great. When you watch that show, you feel the authorship behind it. By the way, Free Margot, Justice for Sergei. I can't wait to see that. Why isn't Star Trek at least on the level of For All Mankind? Why are we getting such lazy, shitty, infantile writing in Star Trek? Why? I don't get it. There's not any effort to create. I mean, Where's the one great episode if somebody tell me the one great episode of Strange New Worlds, people are going to look, where's their City on the Edge of Forever? Where's their Balance of Terror? Where's their Errand of Mercy? Where's their Arena? I mean, they rip off the Gorn badly. You have one episode of Star Trek that's iconic using the Gorn. They're like, the Gorn's goofy. We can make the Gorn better. Yeah, you make the Gorn better by not turning it into the Gorn. You don't give us a really interesting examination of what their society could be like. No, you just turn them into xenomorphs. It makes no sense at all. And then they're like, please tell me what happened to the end at Hegemony. Was it the end of Best of Both Worlds Part 2? Jesus Christ. Artificially Stupid Intelligence says, I may be in the minority, but Star Trek Lower Decks gives so much love to old Star Trek. It's the one thing I've seen in a long time that made me like Trek. Made me like it. Look, no doubt Mike McMahon loves Star Trek. And Star Trek Lower Decks did a lot of interesting things, and obviously it is a love letter to Star Trek. But to me, it's where Star Trek is at now. It's all just to be laughed at. It's all a comedy. I really want to see something. And look, it was very funny, but there is a certain contingent of people that, and it's fine. I tend to take my genre stuff very seriously. I'll give you an example. I use this on a panel at Comic-Con. I think most of you will understand this. Galaxy Quest. Galaxy Quest is a movie that pretty much everybody likes. I like it. I love the cast. I love the Thermians. I love everything about Galaxy Quest except one thing. I think Galaxy Quest itself, and it works because it's a comedy. But the actual TV show, now go with me on this. We're in universe. So you got the actors that were clearly in a Star Trek inspired show. The show Galaxy Quest that everybody's a fan of, as it's depicted in the movie, now I'm talking about the TV show within the universe of the movie, is goofy. It's halfway between a serious science fiction show and a Saturday morning cartoon. By Grapthal's hammer, never give up, never surrender. I get what they're doing. They're doing a shorthand, but what they're saying in that movie is that the Galaxy Quest show itself is for a certain kind of person. They're making a value judgment about the show itself. And I get it. You need a quick... If you were watching the City on the Edge of Forever version of Galaxy Quest within the movie, it would not support the comedy of what's going on. Now, I would also say this. For any Star Trek fans worth their salt, in 1976, an anthology came out called Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Or no, Star Trek New Voyages. Star Trek New Voyages was edited by Sandra Marshak and Myrna Colbraith that went on to write some wacky Star Trek novels like The Price of the Phoenix, Triangle, and a few wacky things. But they curated a Star Trek New Voyages, and they were fan-written short stories. Now, you have to forgive me. I did read this when I was 9 at Camp Orkyla. My mom sent it to me at summer camp. I packed it but she wrote it in the book. I was so pissed. How dare you? But in this book, there's a story called Visit to a Small Planet Revisited. I think that's the name of the story. But in the story, DeForest Kelley, William Shatner, and Leonard Nimoy somehow get beamed on to the actual Starship Enterprise. It is Galaxy Quest. So for anyone that thought Galaxy Quest was hugely original, it really came from this Star Trek short story, Visit to a Small Planet Revisited, in Star Trek New Voyages, and there was Star Trek New Voyages 2. But Star Trek New Voyages has this story. It also has a great story called Mind Sifter that was turned into a film directed by Mark Edward Lewis, and they did it for James Cawley's Star Trek New Voyages, so Star Trek Phase 2 series. They adapted that. It's a great short story. The Klingons kidnap Kirk and bring him back in time and put him in a mental institution. It's a really, really terrific story. So even Galaxy Quest came from somewhere else. But if they had done that, if they'd made the show within Galaxy Quest serious, you wouldn't have understood it. They had to make it look, and I do believe the point I'm trying to make is the people working on Star Trek now look at Star Trek the same way we, the audience, look at the TV show Galaxy Quest in the movie Galaxy Quest. It's not to be taken seriously. It's halfway between a Saturday morning Sid Marty Krofft, Land of the Lost, the Bugaloos, Sigmund and the Sea Monster, Lidsville. It's halfway between that and Manimal. I know that's a extreme example, but they don't take Star Trek seriously. Rick Berman, having interviewed him, Rick Berman, I believe, my personal opinion, is that he always believed he was kind of slumming. He was on his way out at Paramount. They gave him Star Trek. He held on with dear life, and he produced 25 seasons of television, in 18 years and 4 feature films, and he kept the train running. But I don't think he ever loved it. Because Star Trek is absolutely an acquired taste, and there is a stigma around it. But with the right creatives now, if you could find the right creative staff of people that were... Look, what Star Trek needs is Interstellar. It needs Dune. It needs that sensibility. And I'm not saying, well, that doesn't mean it's not going to be fun. But there are episodes, whether you're talking about the Immunity Syndrome, the Doomsday Machine, there is a seriousness. There should be a thoughtful seriousness. I keep going back to the reboot of Galactica. What we're getting is more closer to Sid and Marty Krofft now. We're getting Joss Whedon Star Trek. We're getting Firefly Star Trek. What we need to get The Martian. We need to get Project Hail Mary. We need to get Interstellar. We need to get, the German series Dark. The independent sci-fi movie Europa Report. There's so many, or better yet, if you haven't watched it, the Japanese anime Pluto. If you haven't seen that, if you hear it's an Astro Boy prequel, don't let that bother you. Pluto is one of the most compelling science fiction things I've watched, and I watched that last month. Fantastic. It's 8 episodes. It's some very, very, very compelling science fiction about artificial intelligence. It's amazing. MTH 8020 says, Rob, what are your thoughts on Fantastic Four? I liked it, but again, I think it could have been. I wanted it to be half an hour longer, to be honest. I wanted to delve into these characters more. What I saw was all the scenes were perfunct. They all served the film, but I wanted it to be a little bit more. If this makes any sense, I wanted Fantastic Four to have a little bit more Almost Famous in it. I leave that for all of you to decide. A little bit more character. Wraith7 says they should hire Vic Mignogna to be the new head of the Star Trek franchise. His Star Trek Continues fan series proves that he gets and loves Star Trek. Yes, but it also proves that he gets and loves Vic Mignogna. Vic Mignogna? That is a show where it's all about him. And there's great stuff that goes on, but let me tell you, I'll tell you where Star Trek Continues fell down for me. So there is an episode. It is basically it's a sequel to Mirror Mirror, one of my favorite original series episodes, the first Mirror Universe episode. And at the beginning of that episode, they recreate the scene from the end of Mirror Mirror because Vic wanted to play this. Be the captain of this enterprise. Find a reason for sparing the Hulk. Find a reason for sparing the Hawkins and make it stick. One man with a vision. That whole thing. All of my life, I've had a question about that episode. See, what happens in this episode is they go into the Mirror Universe after Mirror Mirror. Instead of going back to our Enterprise, they go into the Mirror Universe. And you see what happened afterwards. Is Mirror Spock going to take over the Enterprise? And to be fair, it's a pretty great episode. But the one thing I wanted to see was how did the Mirror crew get into the transporter room in our universe? They missed an opportunity. They missed an opportunity because Vic wanted to play that scene. He wanted to recreate it. I like a lot of Star Trek Continues, but there's a lot of episodes I don't like. But a lot of it's really, really good. And I really like Michelle Specht. So, but yeah, it's good. I mean, there's a lot, but I don't think they should hire him. He's problematic at best. But he did a good job, and there's a lot of love put in that show. Brett's 8070 says, if I was CEO of Skydance, I'd hire 2 Trek franchise leads, both with talent and a proven track record. One of them would be a Trek fan and a devotee. The other would be an outsider like Nick Meyer. Could be. I mean, I'm very, very interested to hear the Khan audio drama, because that was originally a 3-part, 3-episode series that was going to be a standalone, like a TV event. And one of my favorite Star Trek novelists, David Mack, and of course Kirsten Beyer, wrote it based on his original script. So I'm curious to see how that's going to go. So we'll see. But I think you're right. See, here the problem with hiring fans to do anything professional on a TV show is they've just never done it before. And it's hard for fans to understand the difference where they have to leave their fandom at the door and be a professional. And that's a really difficult thing to do. So I don't know. I mean, look, everyone says, Akiva Goldsman will tell you what a big Star Trek fan he is. And I'm like, then why do you serve up the swill that you serve up? Write a better script. Use your crew. Henry Alonzo Myers talks about how great your sets are. Why don't you both get other people to write those scripts? Find a real writer's room. You know, find people that can write, and stop making every one of your episodes about previous Star Trek episodes that are written by other people. You've already stolen a bunch of characters you didn't create, which I don't understand. Like, oh my God. You know, we're going to create Uhura, and we're going to tell you stories about her that we're going to get there first. We're going to give you Scotty. We're going to give you Dr. McCoy. We're going to give you Kirk. Fearless Wolf 5928 says, no Breaking Bad Trek because they want merch, not meaning. Plushies sell better than pain. It's Marvel tier fluff with phasers. No, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that they need to make a show that it has any way, shape that's like Breaking Bad, a crime thriller. Breaking Bad is a show where the producers knew what show they were going to make, and it's really, really, really well written. That's all I'm saying. And Better Call Saul, brilliantly written shows where the creators really know what they're doing. That material is very elevated. The characters are memorable. I mean, to watch that show is to love that show. You can do the same thing with Star Trek. I mean, look at The Martian. Ridley Scott's The Martian, especially the extended version. That is very Star Trekian, especially when you see the group that works at NASA. That's Project Hail Mary, Interstellar. You know, those are the kinds of things. I don't mean that it should be oppressively dark in any way, shape, or form. That's not what I mean. Sven Orpheus 2778 sent in 5 Burnett gift memberships. That's very nice of you. For those of you who might be new to the channel, we will have a member call on Saturday. We usually start member calls at 11. It's just, if you're a member of the channel, anybody, you can be a member for 99 cents a month or more if you want. We hang out. We shoot the shit. Sometimes they've been 5 hours long. No other people, just members, and we talk amongst ourselves. It's so much fun. Brett's 8070 became a member. Thanks. Well, you can come now, Brett's 8070. And Sven Orpheus became a member as well. Thank you very much. MC Plainview 8376 says, have you seen the set photos of the Fincher-directed Cliff Booth spinoff? I wonder how Fincher's style will gel with the Tarantino script. I don't know, but I love Tarantino and Fincher. I love that this is getting made. I think it's fucking wild. But like somebody pointed out earlier, it'd be nice to see it in a theater. It really would be. So, yeah, I think it's wild that they're doing it. What a crazy thing to be getting. I'm excited. I am excited to see it. Well, everyone, I think I'm going to end this show. I've still got a lot of letters in the quiver, and I want to thank you all for listening to me Trek rant. Probably honestly, my last Trek rant. I just look at what they're doing now, and I just don't understand it. Who's the audience for this? Oh, you know what? I just realized I didn't read. Shit, man, I got to read this article. I'm not going to end the show. Hang on. Did I really blast my... Wait, did I hope it's still here. I hope so. Yes, okay. We got to read this article. We got to end this. Okay, I didn't read this article from TrekMovie.com about the new Starfleet Academy TV series, because this is the shit. So, by the way, just to point out that, see this? Okay, this is Starfleet Academy at San Francisco. See this the picture that you can see on screen right now? In Starfleet Academy, this giant circular thing is a ship. Part of Starfleet Academy is a giant ship that takes off, because, it's so aerodynamic. Because starships are meant to work in gravity wells of planets, which is another conceit from 2009, which I don't get. So in Starfleet Academy, half the time they're going to have lessons on an actual ship, so they can go places and do things. Just thought I would point that out to everybody. So if you see that, there it is. So let's delve into this article, shall we? Anthony Pascal, our old friend Anthony Pascal, wrote this. Star Trek Starfleet Academy showrunners talk 32nd century setting and how the ship is part of the school. San Diego Comic-Con was a sort of coming-out party for Star Trek Starfleet Academy. Few details were known about the show before the weekend, but now we have the first images, the first trailer, and some character details. At the Star Trek Universe panel yesterday, co-executive producers, co-showrunners Alex Kurtzman and Noga Landau offered up some more insight into the show and explained some key parts of the trailer. A new generation to fulfill Star Trek's vision. We knew going in the show was set in this 32nd century after the events of Star Trek Discovery. First of all, can you imagine if somebody like the 32nd century were 1,000 years ahead in the Star Trek future? How humanity would be different. Hell. But again, a total failure, lack of imagination. But anyway. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to do that. But we knew going into the show was set in the 32nd century after the events of Star Trek Discovery. This is a time when the Federation and the Starfleet are rebuilding after the devastation caused by the burn, which, by the way, might be the dumbest thing ever to happen in Star Trek history. Ever. Speaking to the capacity crowd in Hall H, Noga Landau explained how the setting works for a show trying to appeal to today's younger generation. You're never going to do that. You're never going to get Star Trek to appeal. What you're going after is an audience that doesn't exist, but okay. First of all, it's set in the 32nd century. It takes place in a time right after the burn, if you're familiar with that. But it's a time of rebuilding. It's a time when, for the generation of Starfleet cadets, the world has to be fixed, and a lot of the responsibilities of that lies on their shoulders. It was a very intentional choice because a lot of the generation who's alive right now, who would be going to Starfleet Academy if there was a Starfleet Academy, that's a similar thing to what they would be going through. Kurtzman picked up on that idea and tied it back to Star Trek history. We look at a generation now that is inheriting all of these divisions and all of these major issues. What we felt was that we wanted to create a show that anchored us back to Gene Roddenberry's essential vision of hope. How do you find it? How do you rebuild it? So this is the first Academy class back after 120 years of a closed Starfleet. They have a tremendous amount on their shoulders, and their mission is to reinstate the original vision of Star Trek. It's a school, it's a ship, it's both. To make the show, Paramount is using several stages at Pinewood Studios in Toronto, including the largest soundstage in North America, to create the San Francisco campus of Starfleet Academy, again with the sets. The trailer, however, shows scenes set on the ship, the USS Athena, and the lead character, played by Holly Hunter, what's her name, has been described as the Captain and Chancellor, Kurtzman explained. I'm sure there's been some questions about the trailer in terms of, what did I just see up there? Why is there a ship that's landing in San Francisco? And the answer is, the school is a ship, and the ship is part of the campus in San Francisco. So they go to class in San Francisco, and they go to class in the ship. And because resources are lighter in the 32nd century, think of it like a teaching hospital. The ship gets to deploy with the fleet in real-life situations, so they can learn in the field. So this is not just theoretical classrooms. So, pardon me, Alex Kurtzman, but if I might just ask a question, why isn't your ship just in orbit? And you can beam there. It's the 32nd century. You've got all kinds of crazy transporter technology. Why does the ship have to land and come down and be on top of your campus. I'm just saying, I get it, because you want to show that. But that's really dumb. And see, these ideas, the ship is the campus. Well, I'm sorry. It's Star Trek. If you want to have a ship be your campus, have it in orbit. Why do you want to have the ship fly down? Why would you do that? Like, why would anybody, in the 23rd century, you've got transporter technology. In 24th century, you have transporter technology. We're in the 32nd century. And the burn happened only 120 years ago or whatever, if you believe that stupid shit. This is my problem with the people making Star Trek. Alex Kurtzman never thinks to himself, so I wanted this ship to come down. It comes down and it's on top of the academy. And it's part of the classroom. And then it flies back up. And then it becomes a spaceship. It's Star Trek. And why wouldn't you have your ship if you wanted to do that? It's in geosynchronous orbit. You know, I mean, what are the resources you're using to fly down into the gravity well of a planet? Wouldn't beaming people be easier? I'm just saying, it's Star Trek, but now you have your giant ship that you're going to have go up and down. I mean, I can't make this up. But already you've alienated me because your concept is fucking dumb. Well, it looks cool. You and your sets, man. How about write a story that makes sense? By the way, that would have been the first thing anybody who could write a great Star Trek story would tell you. We don't need a ship to come back and forth. That's really dumb. It's really dumb. I'm just saying. And so is this. Yeah, that's just really stupid. But anyway, let's go back to this business. So here's the bridge of the Athena in their giant flying saucer ship. You're going to see Star Trek episodes where we meet new species. Right, because it's Starfleet Academy, but wouldn't the new species come to school? You're going to see Star Trek episodes that are about diplomacy. Really? You're going to see Star Trek episodes where these cadets who are not yet captains are learning who they are and how they fit into Starfleet. Well, I'd hope so. It is called Starfleet Academy. They can make mistakes in ways that if you're already a captain or if you're already in Starfleet, you really can't. Because they're in school. Right. So these characters get to do unique things in that way. Again, Paper Chase. Dead Poets Society. I mean, it's like we have never heard the concept of something set in a school. You can see the USS Athena. Here it is. Here's the ship docking with Starfleet Academy. This is so stupid. I mean, this. I'm sorry. This is just. I keep doing that, which is also very stupid. But it is really stupid. The show is not all about the kids. Kurtzman also noted how adult characters are a key to the formula and drew a comparison to another successful franchise. Not The Paper Chase, not Friday Night Lights, where the teachers were important. It's really exciting. This is Alex Kurtzman. It's really exciting to also have these teachers who are really, really fun. One rule on the show was that the teachers have to be as interesting and as fun as the cadets. So if you've seen Harry Potter, obviously the teachers are a huge part of it, and they're just as entertaining. And that was really how we wanted to build it. So, you know, it's pretty fun. Okay, you know what? The teachers are fun. So that's what we're getting. We're getting Harry Potter Star Trek. We're not getting Dead Poet Society Star Trek. We're not getting Paper Chase Star Trek. Professor Kingsfield. We're not getting Friday Night Lights Star Trek. We're not even getting Lords of Discipline Star Trek. We're getting the Star Trek where, I mean, it's the Easy A Star Trek. Those teachers were fun. I liked Easy A. I mean, you heard what the showrunner of Star Trek said. It's pretty fun. The teachers are pretty fun. What about the great Socratic method? What about the lessons of what you're going to learn, how you can grow in school? I mean, watch Alan Parker's Fame, which was 4 years at the High School of Performing Arts in New York. Watch any any movie about. If all you watch was Harry Potter, and your spaceship goes to and fro from orbit to the lid of your fucking Starfleet Academy, And then you have to watch the trailer. I'm sorry. But you can't get me to get behind this stuff. It's like, who thought of this? Did anybody, like, did your art department go, we're in the 32nd century, you know, guys, and we have transporter technology, and why wouldn't you have an orbiting campus? Part of your campus would be an orbit. Because wouldn't you do things like, I don't know, if you had a geosynchronous, or better yet, if you wanted to, you could even have had a geosynchronous orbit campus that had a space elevator that was attached, because it is the 32nd century, that's attached to campus. You could have had a space elevator. You could have had anything that was interesting, because you're going to have a lot of lessons, navigational lessons. You're going to have to learn how to fly. There's so many things, but, you know, remember, we already saw a couple episodes of Starfleet Academy. The first duty, you know, lower decks. It's not like it's not rocket science, folks. And, you know, in the 24th century, they didn't have some flying saucer that went back and forth from orbit here because, hey, part of it, we're going to take our kids on an adventure. Yeah, we're going to go on field trips. I guess we have Quidditch matches, too. But if Alex Kurtzman is bringing up Harry Potter, I'm like, okay, do you know what? That's not what the audience wants to watch. The audience, none of your characters were, say, first-year Hogwarts students. And why do we have a female Jem'Hadar? I'm not going to belabor the point, but I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to get off this show. I want to thank everybody for supporting this channel and letting me go on a Star Trek rant. I feel better. I feel unburdened. I feel like, you know, I just wish, it just makes me sad. You know, the state of education in America makes me sad. We need Professor Kingsfield. We need the great ideas of expanding our minds through proper education. That education is its own sake. Remember what I always say, kids. A strong national defense and identity begins, first of all, with a healthy, educated population. But as George Carlin would tell you, they don't want us to be either one of those things. I mean, sometimes I think that Star Trek is a plot to dumb down the population and not elevate it. And if they did a paper chase like Star Trek Academy show that was like Dead Poets Society or Donna Tartt's, I mean, to be fair, in Donna Tartt's Secret History, somebody gets murdered. But if I made a Starfleet Academy show, I'd definitely throw that in the mix. Rob Burnett's Starfleet Academy show, Paper Chase, Dead Poets Society, Social Network, Easy A, Fame, both the TV series and the movie, Friday Night Lights, Lords of Discipline. I'm just going to have to live the latter half of my twilight years perpetually frustrated with the lack of Star Trek that's worthy of, well, anyone, really, anyone's attention. On that note, I want to thank everybody for generously supporting this channel via Super Chats and Tips, for listening to me rant and rave. And, you know, if you like, I understand. Remember, there's going to be people that watch all Star Trek and like it. I'm not here to tell you not to like Star Trek, like my letter writer astutely wrote. I can tell you what I like and dislike. Just because I hate something doesn't mean you can't like it. And by me hating something is not a judgment on you. It's just like I don't complain when people like George Lazenby. I mean, I like George Lazenby, but people like Roger Moore better than Sean Connery. I don't understand why they do, but, you know, to me, Sean Connery's Bond, but then we got Roger Moore. Or then we got Lazenby, then we got Roger Moore, then we got Timothy Dalton, then we got Pierce Brosnan, and then we got Daniel Craig. And you know what? One Bond will lead you to another. It's all a continuum. So never let anyone else tell you what you should or shouldn't like. And never criticize somebody. Look, there's a lot of shitty things I like. I like them. Even I know they're shitty. But I like them anyway. And, like, come on, Stone Cold, greatest movie ever. In my mind. So I don't expect you to like that. But anyway, thank you, everybody. Thanks to my moderating staff. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. Unless, of course, you're watching Star Trek Discovery, because they don't have a new story to tell. They've ripped off everybody else's stories, and they're going to give you rehashes of characters and situations that you've seen in other better Star Trek, or in other better science fiction novels or short stories, like Ursula K. Le Guin's Those Who Walk Away from Umlaas. God forbid, I would love to see a season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds with that great cast and all that production design. They really need to rethink their aesthetic with the effects. And you know, if you're going to make a show about why does Star Trek Academy look like no one's turned on the lights? It's school, man. You got to have school lighting. But anyway, I guess that's it. I have nothing more to say. And like, subscribe. We'll figure it out.